Good evening all and welcome to tonight's compilation of scary stories. As per someone's request over on Patreon, tonight's compilation is going to feature exclusively cursed object and haunted doll scary stories. So for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Have you ever heard of Kachina dolls? To understand these stories better, you have to know a few things about Navajo culture. They believe that you are not to own Kachina dolls, because it is said that they come to life at night. Traditionally, these dolls were made by Pueblo medicine men. When they were made, their creators would bless them and put their hair into the center of the dolls. This was before they were mass-produced by other people and other tribes. The first story takes place in the late 90s. I wasn't there for this story, but it happened to my cousin. She moved into town and found a trailer to rent for a decent price. It was already furnished by her landlord that had just moved. She had asked my cousin not to move too many things, as she would be moving her stuff out over a period of time. Inside the trailer was a fake fireplace with a mantle on top. On the mantle were a collection of Kachina dolls. My cousin was a little wary of these, as they are taboo to own, but she left them in place as requested by her landlord. The first night is when things started to get weird. So my cousin gets ready for bed and lies down. In the middle of the night, she is awoken by something dropping in the living room. She gets out of bed and heads to the living room, turns on the lights as she gets there, and looks around to see what had fallen, to discover 3 of the Kachina dolls laying on the floor. She thinks nothing of it and places them back on the mantle and heads back to bed. She was only lying down for about 30 minutes before she hears the same noise. She heads to the living room to see the dolls on the floor again. A little weirded out, she places them back on the mantle and heads back to her own room. But before she gets there, she hears the noise again. Only this time the thud is followed by what sounds like tiny footsteps. She goes to the living room to find the dolls further than they were when they had dropped in the first place. Definitely weirded out, she now tries to shake it off and places them on the mantle once more and goes to bed. She was in bed for another 30 minutes when she hears them fall, and then there are a little set of taps, like feet running across the floor. She finds the little dolls on the floor by the door. She concludes that there is no way the dolls could have fallen that far on their own. She was officially freaked out at that point and decides to collect the dolls and put them in a box and places the box in her closet. All night, she could hear the sounds of little scratches coming from the box. The next morning, she asks the landlord to take the dolls and hasn't had a problem since. The second story takes place in the 70s, when my grandmother was a teenager. She decides to spend the night with her cousin on the res. They spend most of the evening swapping stories, trying to spook one another out, when her cousin gets the great idea to bring out the Ouija board. They start by asking the typical questions. Is anyone here? When did you die? And the like. They played for a few minutes without any action and put it away for a while. They pull it out around midnight to resume the game and finally get a response. I don't know the specifics of what they initially asked, but it led to them asking, "Are you here?" The planchette moves to yes, and slowly drags towards the picture in the bottom right, the face of a man behind the woman using the board. They are all convinced that the other is moving it to scare the other, and of course they swear they're not. So they decide to ask, "Where are you?" And the planchette spells out chimney. They grab their flashlight and head towards the fireplace and shine the light. About 5 or 6 feet up the chimney, they find a Kashina doll hanging there. There was no explanation for it being there, and no one could have placed it there, as they had built a fire there earlier in the evening. The ashes were still warm. They decided best to stop playing, and my grandma hasn't touched a Ouija board since. About 10 years ago or so, my family and I brought back these small vases who we were told were 400 years old from Machu Picchu. The vases were made from mud and had a face carved on them. We were given them by a family friend who said he wanted to give us something special for visiting Peru. He claims he brought them from a local in the Pisco region of Peru where Machu Picchu is. We brought it back home to Canada, and pretty much from week 1, a horrible streak of bad luck and accidents began to happen to our family. My mum came down with cataract at a very young age. My father lost both his jobs. My brother and I were both constantly sick, and my little sister would start screaming randomly. Pretty much on the verge of being homeless, we were looking for things to sell and came across these things. We didn't know if we could even sell them, and for how much. To get an idea of the value, we called one of my dad's friends in Peru who had worked in a museum. After a bit of back and forth, he told my dad that these types of items are not meant to leave its home soil and are not worth more than a few bucks. He said that these items are probably cursed. He said to lift the curse, we prick our fingers and smear a little bit of blood on each one and send them back. Now, of course, we were very skeptical and thought they were probably worth something. We assumed the guy wanted them so that he could sell them. I mean, a blood sacrifice? That's ridiculous. Fast forward 2 days, my mother and father get into a pretty nasty car accident. We were okay, but they both needed to be off work for a few weeks. After that, they both decided that maybe we should send them back and do the blood thing. We sent them back, and the next week after that, things got noticeably better. My father found a very good job, as did my mum. We found a really good place to live with a very low rent and overall better health. What do you guys think? Coincidence or cursed pots? This is my story about my haunted doll, Claire. She's been featured in books, haunted objects, stories of ghosts on your shelves, a few paranormal podcasts, and the TV show Haunted Towns that aired on Destination America back in 2017. You can still catch reruns of the show on the Travel Channel every now and then. She was in the season finale featuring Madonna, Georgia. Here's my story. As an 8-year-old child, I was given an old porcelain doll by a very dear family friend, Miss Marion. She was constantly coming across things and giving them to me. This doll was the last thing she ever gave to me. I was never really into dolls at all growing up, but I took the doll and placed her in my room in a small child-sized rocking chair. The chair sat next to my closet and dresser, right beside my nightstand. The doll was very pretty. She was dressed in a peach and cream-colored dress with an apron and petticoats. She had little black Mary Jane shoes that, when removed, showed her delicately painted toenails. Her body was soft. Only her head, forearms, hands and legs from the knees down were porcelain. Her lips were pink, and her dark brown hair hung in slightly frizzed and now loose curls. Her eyes were brown, her cheeks were rosy peach color, all like mine. Miss Marion made a point of saying the doll reminded her of me, which is why she gave it to me. From the moment the doll, who I named Claire, came into my house, things began to happen. I was always uneasy with Claire. I never wanted to touch her, and when I played in my room, I felt like she was watching me. It wasn't anything to panic about, but I do remember feeling like if I did something wrong, she might actually tell on me. How ridiculous does that sound? The first real occurrence I remember was when I was reading in my room. Ghost stories, if you can believe that. When a musical carousel horse that sat on my dresser began to play. Not just a few notes, which old mechanical music boxes will do at times, but like someone had wound it up fully. I sat stunned and stared at the little horse as it moved up and down in time with the music. Then it just stopped. Not wound down, just suddenly stopped. I was a pretty brave kid. I didn't run, and I didn't tell my parents. I also used to see a shadow man in the hallway or in my parents' bedroom door whilst I was growing up. And if my mom didn't believe me about that, she wouldn't believe about the mundane thing like a music box playing. So I just let it go. The next thing that happened was the voice. For several nights, and on into the years, I was woken up by what sounded like a woman inches from my face, shouting my name. "Jill, wake up." I jump and sit up and find my room empty. Those happenings died down after a few months. She then started to plague my little brother with the same thing, and now he and I are grown and gone, and she's moved on to my dad. The little things started to get to me. I'd put something in a certain place, only to find it later on the floor or on my dresser right next to Claire. All my missing items eventually turned up around her. Once a ring ended up in the pocket of her apron. Books would fall off my shelf, and perfume smells would sometimes fill my room. The doll itself didn't smell at all, but the air around her would. My catalyst to finally getting Claire out of my room was the night I woke up after hearing thumping around my closet. I opened my eyes, sat up in bed, and of course my eyes were drawn to the nightlight where Claire sat. As I watched, the source of the thumping became clear. The rocking chair Claire occupied was rocking on its own. I had thick shag carpet, so there was no way it was rocking just by chance. If that wasn't enough, Claire's feet, which were both turned to the side facing the opposite way from each other, slowly straightened themselves to both be pointing directly up. This part still freaks me out 20 years later. She then turned her head, which was quite impossible to do since it was attached, fixed to her cloth body. She looked towards me, and every music box in my room, 4 of them, started to play all at once. I was frozen in fear. I didn't feel endangered, so as much as I just felt scared of what was happening, I screamed for my mum and dad. The music stopped, but Claire maintained her gaze in my direction. And this is why I hate dolls. Even after that, I couldn't totally get rid of Claire. I ended up stuffing her into the back of a box of a storage closet. She's still there as far as I know. So is the woman who now screams my dad's name in the middle of the night, and not in a good way. While I think she explains some of the oddities that happened in my parents' house, I don't think she is the type at all, especially the Shadow Man. My friend Tim Weisberg is a paranormal/radio podcast host of the show Spooky South Coast, and also an author. He asked me to lend him Claire once he heard my story back in 2011. I obliged, and Claire went to stay with him for a few months. He wrote about his experiences with Claire while she stayed with him in the book Haunted Objects that I mentioned earlier. Temperature changes in the rooms she stayed in, along with hearing voices, were two of his notes. Claire also stayed briefly at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in 2012. The guys from the Haunted Towns show encountered some things in my parents' house while Claire was with them. She now lives at my friend's old haunted house. He's a Hogan, and he and his lower, along with the other house spirits, tend to keep her in line. We were in my daughter's room going through the whole bedtime routine. My wife sat on the bed brushing my daughter's hair to put it in a braid, while I stood around waiting to tuck her in and say goodnight. While waiting, I commented on a collectible 2010 holiday Barbie doll, still boxed, that was given to my daughter by our neighbor. I was curious to know if she had taken it out of the box, and my wife replied that yes, she did, because dolls are meant to be played with. To that comment, I mentioned to my daughter that both her mother and I had collectible dolls tucked away in our closet, each of them still in boxes and never opened. These were a Bruce Lee action figure and a Jesse the Governor Ventura doll, and a 95th anniversary collectible Raggedy Ann doll. As I said this, my wife quickly corrected me and said no, that it's a Cabbage Patch doll that she owned, and that one of them would tan well. Having just reorganized my closet one day before, I was pretty sure it was a Raggedy Ann doll, but my wife swore up and down that she never owned such a thing. Curiosity got the best of me, and so I pulled the box out of the closet and brought it back to the room to show her. As I held it up, my wife stopped brushing my daughter's hair and slowly shook her head, and, trying not to scare my daughter, mouthed the words, "It's not mine. I've never seen it before," with a very serious look in her eyes. My wife has an incredibly sharp mind and a memory that sometimes terrifies me, so I know she wasn't trying to pull my leg. I asked if it might have been given to her by her sister, but a quick phone call confirmed that her sister had not. She once did, however, give her a collectible Mary Poppins doll, which both of them remembered. So here we are now in our home, a doll for which we have no idea where it came from. I thought I had chills already running down my spine at that point, until I realized the doll was coincidentally the same as Annabelle, the haunted doll, which spawned horror movies and are now kept in the Ed and Lorraine Warren Occult Museum. It's probably nothing, but seriously, we freaked out. My wife does have a Cabbage Patch Kid tucked away in another closet, but it's not this one. I come from an Indonesian family, one quite proud of its roots, and one always keen to latch onto something closely related to Indonesian history. When I was much younger, my mother had bought a wayang doll. It used to be used for puppet theatres in Indonesia, and are said to have their own personality and vices. The doll quickly becomes the pride and joy in our house, a centerpiece on the mantel, smiling and looking over the room at all times. It had stood there for a year, with never any bother. That was until my mum started seeing her now husband. The doll quickly got an eerie feeling to it, but nothing too unusual. When things got serious between my mother and stepdad, and he moved in, things started to get a bit freaky. It started off with picture frames falling off the walls and mantelpiece. Initially, not thinking much of it, just kept putting everything back in its place. Slowly, I kid you not, the face of the doll turns its grin into a frown, turned unpleasant to look at, but still all seemed innocent. One night, we had all gone to bed. Normally we had candles on the mantelpiece, blew them out, and went upstairs. An hour or so later, smoke started to creep upstairs. My mother let out a yelp, calling us down. The doll was on fire, having its arms stretched out in flames, no candle lit, a completely dark room aside for the doll. It cast the scariest shadow on the wall before my mum threw a bucket of water over it. Through all of this, to this day, it still sends a shiver running down my spine. We got a family member to get rid of the remains, and never saw it again after that night. When I was 10, my mum ran a daycare of sorts out of our house. My sister became friends with this vindictive, seemingly void of anything good, girl that my mum babysat. This girl used to brag about her brothers being able to make her troll dolls walk off her dresser at night. We obviously thought that she was full of crap, because she usually was. Her brother and his friends used to go cut themselves in a graveyard that was overlooked by a cult compound at the edge of town. Anyway, one day my sister and this girl got into some kind of spat, and the girl stole one of her Barbie dolls. My sister was livid, because like most girls, she was obsessed with her Barbies. So the next time this girl comes over, she returns the doll. Only it had half of its hair cut off and replaced with horsehair. It was sewed in. That night, my sister runs into my room, screaming at me that her Barbies are alive. Now, we grew up in a pretty strict religious environment, where lying was met with a beating. Being that my sister was the least likely to lie out of us 3 siblings, I started to get freaked out. According to her, she woke up and for some reason couldn't take her eyes off this particular Barbie. She said it stood up, stretched out like a human would after a long sleep, and turned her head to look right at my terrified sister. My sister pulled her covers back over her head, and the Barbie ran down the stairs, and that's when she came bursting into my room all frantic. I was so sure she was telling the truth that I sat at the top of our stairs with my metal Tonka truck, ready to smash it if it came back up. We never saw the Barbie again. Every time I've asked my sister about it as an adult, she still sticks to the same story. My very young daughter started telling us that she would see a lady in our house 6 months ago, about the time she started to be able to communicate well. She said there was an older lady who she described as always wearing brown. We call her the lady. I showed my daughter pictures of her great-grandparents on both sides, thinking it was just a deceased family member, but she never recognized anyone. We started noticing sounds, like doors creaking, rustling sounds and things dropping, cabinet doors creaking. But everything we heard we thought could be potentially explainable. We started hearing things more frequently about 5 weeks ago. I saw a cabinet door in our bathroom swing open while I was brushing my teeth in the reflection of the mirror behind me. Again, super strange, but perhaps somehow potentially explainable. 2 days later, we had a massive water leak behind that same mirror. Due to the water leak, all of our belongings had to have been moved out of our house for the contractors to repair the damage. I've been cleaning and boxing stuff up, and I was boxing up one item in our room when I found 2 old photographs around the 1880s. As soon as I pulled them out, my daughter said, "That's the lady." I asked her which, and she pointed to the younger of the 2 women. We asked her 3 times throughout the day about the photographs, and each time she picked out the same lady. We also noticed the lady in the photo appeared to be wearing brown because of the type of photography. So we took the photographs out and moved them to my new art studio, which is on our property and still in progress. Since removing the old photographs, we have not heard one strange noise in our house. My oldest daughter never makes it through the night in her bed. She has complained since she was a little girl of moving shadows in her room at night. She has since slept every night in her room, all night, since the photographs have been removed. The daughter who sees the lady usually sees her once every week to 2 weeks, so we can't comment about that. Completely surprised by the drastic change in our house, I decided to use a dream/sleep recording app that only records when it hears sounds to see if I could catch something near the photographs in the studio. I mainly want to prove or disprove it to myself. I recorded Thursday afternoon for 3 hours and had 7 audio clips of birds and planes. I tried again Thursday night from 12 to 8 a.m. and this time I had 67 clips. Most of the clips were this weird reverb/electrical feedback that started at after midnight and went on and off for hours. I also heard what sounded like 2 separate single knocks or objects dropping. There was nothing electrical in the studio except the phone itself, as power has not been running in the building yet. There isn't even a breaker box. There's a power pole outside the building about 20 feet away from the front, and last night we left the recorder on from 11:30 to 7 a.m. Not one weird electrical sound all night. We literally caught crickets and 1 clip with 2 small bumps or knocks followed by rustling. We also caught a strange sound at the end of some clip. We don't remember how we came into possession of the photographs. They are not of our family. We confirmed this with our parents. My husband thinks he remembers that one of my customers gave them to me a few years ago. My boyfriend Luke and I went on holiday to Mexico in April 6 years ago. Upon coming back, I was going through our suitcase to wash various items of clothing and came across a tiny statue of what looked like a woman on her knees praying to the sun. Okay. I asked Luke about this, and he said that him and another guy from the group of friends that we went with were out and saw it leaning against a tree stump. Him, being him, thought that this statue was the best thing since sliced bread, and he shoved it in his suitcase to bring it home with us. I thought this was weird, as the statue itself was made from wood and wasn't very flattering. Luke placed it on the table in the hallway, in between our Yankee candles. I'd say about a week later, I was coming downstairs through the hallway and into our living room, when I noticed that it seemed colder by the table. I took this to there being a draft coming in from the front door, and made sure I shut the living room door behind me, in an attempt to keep it from coming in there. Small things started to happen. My keys, that I always put on a hook in the kitchen, would be in the middle of the living room floor, resting on the rug when I would wake up. We have no pets, and I know Luke wouldn't do something so petty to try and mess with me. I had to keep changing light bulbs in the hallway. The phone that was also on this table would go off randomly at all times of the day. I'd answer and hear static. Sometimes I'd hear faint mumbling over it. There were times when I would get ready for bed and just about to lay my head down on the pillow, and I'd pull out that wooden statue. Somehow it had made its way under my pillow, and this happened at least 5 to 7 times. I was home alone one night, watching TV in the living room, when I saw a shape of black smoke in the hallway lingering there, as if it were watching me. It was in the TV reflection. I dared not move my head towards it, and acted like I was totally engrossed in the show I was watching. I could see it from the corner of my eye though, but was too afraid to move. I saw it slowly fade away and move further into the hallway. Me being a big baby, I didn't move and carried on watching my show. I brushed it off, with that if I show no interest, perhaps it would go away. When my boyfriend got home, I asked him if he wanted to go grab McDonald's to get a McFlurry. He jumped at the chance. I wanted to get out of the house to talk about what I saw. Sitting there in the car park, I blurted out the events of the night. He sat quietly. I expected him to not believe me and laugh. But Luke said that he had seen the smoke too, but sometimes it was in the doorway when he woke up. He would rub his eyes and it would still be there, then vanish. We thought about the timeline and realized that all of this happened shortly after finding the statue in the suitcase. That night when we got back, we took the statue into the garden and burnt it. Nothing happened since, and the house somehow feels lighter and warmer. I have a ghost in my room that loves to throw things at me, but probably the scariest thing that ever happened revolved around one of my porcelain dolls, Caroline. Even my cat avoids her at all costs. The first major thing about Caroline, my haunted porcelain doll, is pretty spooky. It seems like whenever I touch her, any part of her, I get sick or hurt within the next week. That's why I put a little sign by her feet that says "Do not touch" in red capital letters. I think the scariest thing that's happened revolving around her was I saw her move one of her eyes. I don't remember all of everything, but I remember I was sitting on the floor doing homework, and I got up to use the bathroom. Right as I did, I saw her left eye blink, then change direction to look directly at me. Needless to say, I hightailed it out of that room. This story takes place when I lived on my old property. I was a little boy, maybe 8 or 9. You see, the cul-de-sac I lived in was a fairly nice neighborhood, nothing crazy. My room was across from my parents, just down a long hall and next to my sister's room. My brother and I shared rooms and a bunk bed. Everything was fine until my sister reached her teen angst phase. Then came the doll. It was a creepy-looking porcelain doll with a black tutu and had a punk rock kind of motif, and she loved it. She got it from her godmother, a woman we no longer speak to. My brother and my mum and I never liked the thing because it gave us the creeps, but hey, it was her doll. However, slowly but surely we began to see a change in her. She was beginning to become more reclusive and angry with my mother for no reason at all, and even cut herself in front of me once. Weird, yes, but nothing quite supernatural. Then she began to sleepwalk. At first we thought it was normal, maybe just stress from being a teenage girl, I don't know, but she started to creep me out. And because of this I began to lock the door at night after my brother fell asleep. And on one of these nights I heard her get up from her bed and slowly walk. I was in my top bunk, mind you, watching under the door when I saw her shadow. See, as my room is across from my parents', I couldn't tell if she was standing there in front of my room or my parents', but it was still very creepy, and she stood there for an unnatural amount of time. On the last occasion, we all awoke one morning to a knife under my parents' bedroom door, and this just made them flip out. They weren't scared, they were more concerned about my sister being nuts and homicidal, since she'd been acting so strangely. Things went on for a little bit, until one day the doll disappeared, and my sister came out furious, huffing and puffing, but no one in the house seemed to have an inkling about its disappearance. And so, life went on, and I never knew what happened to it, until I asked my dad about it years later, and he enlightened me. It turns out that my godmother was heavily into black magic and Santeria, and had a deep hate for my mother over some petty squabble they had before my father and mother were married, and held a deep resentment for her. I guess firstborn females of the family is important in Santeria, and so when she saw an opportunity, she gave my sister that horrible doll we hated. But what actually happened to the doll was the funniest part. My mum is super religious, and I guess at some point she had soaked the doll in holy water and left it in the trash for the garbage man to take out to the dump the next day. Another funny thing, my sister never sleepwalked again. A puppet, almost identical to this. I was a big Pee-wee fan and loved it at first. In my room I had bunk beds, and I slept on the bottom bunk, and in the top bunk I kept all of my favorite toys and stuffed animals. I'd often leave them in really weird formations after having battles and the like, but I always remembered to leave certain ones in certain places because they were my favorites, namely my Ninja Turtles and Pee-wee. A few months after getting this toy though, I started to have some really terrible nightmares about it. Not the "are you afraid of the dark" kind of 90s nightmares for kids, but truly graphic and horrible dreams where someone had broken into our house and made me watch him torture my sisters and my parents while the doll just laughed. You know, scarring stuff. So I told my parents and they immediately got rid of it. This apparently just meant they hid it in the garage, since I couldn't see the stuff stored up that high anyway. A few weeks later, I woke up to all my Ninja Turtles on the floor. Confused, but maybe I shook the bed a bunch in my sleep. And a few days after this, my older sister woke my parents up screaming about a dream she had. It was nearly identical to the dream I had told them about, but I knew she'd never heard it. My parents knew this too, and my mother looked genuinely horrified. I got screamed at for telling my sister about such horrible things, but once it became clear that I really hadn't told her, my mum got even more concerned. I watched her go into the garage, grab Pee-wee, put him in a trash bag, and put him in the dumpster. For years I'd wake up and my stuffed animals would be in really odd places, in places I knew I hadn't left them, in places I would never have left them. I was obsessed. When I was 12, I found Pee-wee in a toy box in the garage. My mum said my dad must have come home, seen it in the trash and pulled it out. But he doesn't remember ever doing that. He swears he didn't even know she threw it away, let alone try to pull it out. I live in an old Victorian house in the UK. It's me, my mum, my dad and my sister. Now my dad and sister aren't very much a fan of yard sales, but we certainly are. Here in the UK they're called boot fairs or car boot sales, depending on where you live. Maybe elsewhere they're called something else. Point being, it's a big yard sale, but you do it in a field and not your yard. Now that that's out the way, my mum is a collector of antiques, all kinds of random stuff, which my dad begrudgingly lets her have and put around the house. What she doesn't put in the house gets left in the garage. Now, on one occasion, we were at a garage sale, and she eyes a porcelain doll. In my mind, it was a hideous thing. But my mother saw it and said that it reminded her of one that she owned as a child and would very much like to purchase it. I think she got it for something like 10p, or 9 cents in America. So that was ridiculously cheap. The woman seemed very happy to get rid of it, and my mother was very happy to have obtained it. She packed it in the car and we got home. We didn't even take it out until the next day. We put it in the garage because my mother wasn't exactly sure what to do with it, and there it stayed. One thing to mention is that our garage is very secure. It only has one entrance through a side door behind our house, which no one else can access as our property is very secure. Not only that, we are also very meticulous about organization. The garage is extremely well organized. Everything has its proper place. So, 2 weeks later, when my mum thinks that she might move some stuff around in the house and put up some new antiques, does she remember the doll and think that she might do some work doing up its hair or maybe painting it to make it look nicer before she displays it in our home. She goes into the garage, and that's when she shouts. I hear her screaming for my sister and me to come down straight away, as my father was at work. We go down, and the garage has been absolutely destroyed. Everything is on the floor. There are antiques that have been shattered, vases, paintings that were hanging up that are now on the ground. Some of them look like they've been stepped through. It was absolute carnage. I wish I'd have taken a picture. Anyway, the only thing that seemed to remain untouched was a locked chest of drawers in one of the corners, and the doll sitting on top of it. My mum, cleaning up bits of pottery, looks up and sees this doll, now in a more ominous light, and says that she was sure she didn't leave it there. Remember how organized my family are, so if she says she didn't leave it there, she really didn't leave it there. She was a bit freaked out, asked if any of us had something to do with this, to which we of course both denied. Not to mention the fact that she was the sole bearer of the key, between her and Dad, as they kept it locked away in their room in the safe. They also had valuables in the locked chest of drawers, you see, and that's why we had to keep it locked away. Anyway, my mum still takes the doll and fixes her up. She looks a lot better after a bit of polish. My mum repaints her lips, does her eyes, and she really is looking top-notch. One of her sleeves of her top was actually a bit worn. She finds a very similar thread and fixes it up too. I was very impressed with my mother's work, and she replaced this old Chinese bell with that doll. It went in our living room, which holds another number of antiques. That night, during the middle of the night, we are all suddenly awoken by a loud crash downstairs. We go down, and one of my mother's antique vases that was on the chimney is now shattered on the brickwork below. She was nearly in tears, but knows that it wasn't any of us, because we were all coming downstairs at the same time seeing what was going on as a reaction to the noise. My dad does a thorough sweep of the house to find nothing. All the windows are closed, all the doors are locked, and there's no way anyone could have gotten away so fast without leaving a trace. The only odd thing, however, is the doll is no longer perched. It is now on the floor. Things start to add up. My dad says he doesn't like the doll and thinks we should get rid of it. My mother, being a no-nonsense kind of woman, absolutely slams him for being ridiculous and says that the vase probably just slipped. But when my father asks then what happened to the garage, is she left speechless and looking at the doll inquisitively. It isn't until a few days later, in broad daylight in the kitchen, when I'm gonna go get some cereal for the morning, that a drawer jumps right out. That's just it. It pushes its way out. With such a loud noise, I run out screaming like a little child. I was beyond terrified and told my mum that there was something weird going on. I had my own suspicions. Ever since we bought that doll, had weird stuff started to happen. So, I did what any sensible person would do. I put it up on eBay. I didn't say it was cursed or anything. I just put up this porcelain doll that my mum had fixed up on eBay. And would you know that we got a buyer within the first 10 hours. It was actually quite a competitive bidding process, and it sold for roughly $100. I packed it away without telling my mother what happened and sold it. When my mum came home from work one of these days, she didn't even notice it was gone, as I had fetched the key and replaced it with the old Chinese bell. It's only after about a week, I think, did she ask who had moved the doll, or Shirley, as she affectionately called it. I said that it broke, and so I put it in the bin last week, and that, well, it was gone now. It had been taken away by the binman. She was a bit upset by this, but honestly she didn't really seem to care all that much. Perhaps she was starting to believe that there was something more spooky with the doll than we originally thought. I was glad to be rid of it, and made sure to put in my eBay listing, absolutely no refunds. My parents still don't know about this, and I think it's better that way. I don't want them to try and track it to buy it again. My boyfriend's grandfather is an antique collector, and one of his interests are dolls, porcelain to be exact. They picked this up, and the previous owners said to be very careful with it because it was special. Completely unfazed by this statement, he didn't ask any further questions. He brought it home with him about 2 weeks ago. The first 3 days were fine, and it stayed in the kitchen. The following day, my boyfriend and I were laying in our room down the hall, talking. It was around midnight when suddenly 3 light knocks were heard through the door. We look at each other, and from the other side I hear his grandfather say his name. I get up and open the door while he was getting ready for whatever task his grandfather had in store for him. Upon opening the door, I expected to be brought face to face with him, but no one was there. I closed the door and shrugged it off, but after I closed the door, I could hear footsteps from down the hall, so I go out to investigate. But in the distance, I can hear both the grandparents snoring. The following day, around the same time, all power to the house was lost and didn't return until 5 or 6 a.m. Thankfully, throughout that night, 1 lamp was on. I don't know how, but occasionally it went out. But for the most part, somehow, it was still being powered. A few more nights go by without anything happening, until just a few nights ago. All through the night there were screams, not in the house but right outside. Last night, at around 2 to 3 a.m., I was laying down watching videos when my boyfriend sat straight up, rambled gibberish mixed with numbers. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he was okay, looked me dead in the eyes, screamed and threw himself back and continued snoring. I asked him about it earlier today, and he has no memory of it. His grandfather is taking the doll to his shop tomorrow, and hopefully, things will go back to normal. After he took it out the house and put it in his antique shop, the air seemed heavy, and everyone is easily irritated. Usually the family is upbeat, kind of an I can conquer anything kind of attitude. I've also had a few hyper-realistic dreams. One where I was drowning, another where I was burned alive, and another where I was pulled apart, and another one where I was captured and shown my new face as I didn't have one. There was a tall man there that said, "Look at the beauty I have created." Unnerving to say the least. When I was between the ages of 7 and 10, I lived in a house in a small town in Missouri. Nothing was abnormal about the house. I mean, normal house settling noises, which would cause me to have nightmares frequently. until this incident that I will begin diving into. The only weird thing that ever happened was our keys going missing. When you walk in the door, there was a giant metal wood stove that we put our keys on. They went missing for weeks. We destroyed the house looking for them, and one day they just reappeared and nobody knew where they came from. Anyway, there was a doll back when I was younger called an Amazing Grace doll. She had holes in her ears so she could hear you and would turn her head where the noise came from and would say, "Mama." Well, I loved this doll. I explicitly remember cleaning my room and propping Grace against the wall so she was sitting up. I lay down on my bed to read when I heard the clicking she would make when her head turned. So I looked up and stared at her and got the normal "Mama" she would say after she heard something. So I tossed my book down and picked her up to make sure she was turned off. She was. I flipped her switch and then flipped it back to off, thinking that it was a normal malfunction. I set her back in a spot and plopped down to continue reading. When I started, she said "Mama" again. So I went and took all her batteries out. I was over it at this point, so I just tossed her on the ground and went back to my spot. She started clicking quicker, and her head was moving back and forth, and she just kept repeating "Mama." I took off. I ran to get my dad, and he saw it and decided that we would burn the little doll. We did, and nothing happened again to my recollection, but my nightmares got worse. And this was when I was still religious, so I would put all my stuffed animals around me in a circle to protect me. I had a turquoise dream catcher and would pray every night for the nightmare to go away. They didn't until we moved. They weren't every day, but definitely several times a week. I was very young when this happened. I don't think I'd even started going to school yet. I don't remember much about that stage of my life, but I still think about this experience to this day. It was near Christmas, and there was a doll my younger sister and I looked forward to playing with every year. It was an angel, where you'd press the button and she would sing Silent Night. The thing is though, once I was done playing with it, I had to return it downstairs. My parents eventually realized we forgot to bring it downstairs, so I was sent upstairs to retrieve it alone. As I went to my room to get it, I heard the doll sing Silent Night. The doll had a history of going off on its own, so I thought nothing of it. I went up and opened the door. My room was completely dark at the time, but when the light from the hallway came in, it shined on the pitch-black figure of a little girl who was playing with the doll. The girl immediately turned her eyes on me, and I stared back at her in shock. My vision blurred, and my ears were ringing, and the next thing I knew, I had to pick myself up from the ground. Nobody seemed to notice I hadn't come downstairs, and confused and unable to comprehend what happened. I would just go downstairs with the doll, seeing as the girl has left. I returned the doll and carried on with my day, because I had no idea what the hell had just happened. I've had a painting follow me for the past 13 years. I and my first boyfriend found it in an old house that we were helping my sister tear down for a friend. I'm pretty sure it's actually a print or copy. It's not all that interesting, honestly. It's just kind of pale-colored print of a little girl seen from behind standing in a field. The only thing about it is that I and a few other people have said that if you stare at it for more than a few seconds, it makes you feel uncomfortable. It doesn't happen to everyone, just some people. For me specifically, there's kind of a blank space in the center that seems like there's something there that you simply aren't seeing. I don't know why. It's just a basic background, but that's how it's always made me feel. So it started with this simple fact that I don't remember bringing the painting home with us, and yet, when we went to pack up and move a few months later, it was in our stuff. Not just lying out somewhere, but actually behind other things. I'm kind of forgetful, so I figured I just grabbed it and forgot. I do remember setting it aside, because my boyfriend didn't want it, and I didn't care, so I left it behind. Well, a month after we move into our new home, I find it tucked behind some random things. Again, I kinda thought maybe someone helping us pack grabbed it or something, so it's not a big deal. At this point, we kind of have a joke about it following us, but didn't think anything of it. We just left it lying around. That relationship ended very badly, and I was left homeless, sleeping on friends' couches. My ex gave me my stuff that equaled out about 3 boxes, and that was it. They were not large boxes. I went through them several times, and I knew the print wasn't in any of them. I was couch hopping for about a year and never saw the print. I met my now husband and we moved in together. Several months after we had unpacked everything, I'm digging through a closet, and guess what I find tucked behind some random junk? The print. I told my husband this story and we again joked about it, but this time we put it on a shelf. We've moved twice more since then, and each time it's come with us. I don't remember ever specifically packing it, but it's always been somewhere in our things. I always put it somewhere out the way, because like I said, it makes me feel a bit strange looking at it for too long. I have been thinking about getting it framed, as I've never done anything with it. I've just accepted that it's apparently going to be with me until it decides not to be anymore. It's never been good or bad as far as I can tell. Just following. When I was really young, I was really into strawberry shortcake. This was when I was about 5 or 6. It so happened that she had a younger sister named Apple Blossom, or something like that. Well, I had an Apple Blossom doll that spoke when you squeezed her. She had a button in her hand as well. I think, but I don't remember that much. Point being, I shared a room with my 3 older sisters, and above our bed we had a hammock made out of a curtain for our stuffed animals. I was playing on the bed with Apple Blossom all by myself in the room, and I remember making her speak with all the buttons. And then she said this: "Praise Satan, you're going to hell," in this really deep and creepy voice. Now I knew damn well that that was not one of her sayings, nor was it a normal thing to happen. So I threw the doll off the bed and ran and started crying. Of course, no one believes me. To this day I stick to that story. My oldest sister has the doll in her apartment, and I still find it incredibly eerie. My grandmother on my mother's side was always considered to be our family's crazy one. Long before I was born, the marriage to my mother's father had failed because my grandmother was far too interested in witchcraft. My grandmother really liked astrology. This was considered witchcraft to my grandfather's very Catholic family. Growing up, she used to tell me stories about the fairies that lived in her garden, and how I should never leave my shoes outside at night, for the gnomes may steal them. As any child of the 90s, I was in love with Disney. So all of Grandma's stories seemed to be just that, stories. There were always rules to being at Grandma's house. Most certainly not your typical ones. Things like leave the windows open at night so the frogs can come in, and be sure not to step on any of the frogs. If you bake something, you must leave a small piece for the fairies, or things will start to go missing. Odd rules, but as a kid it was fun. Now my grandmother was a hoarder for my entire life. The type who has a trail from one end of the house to the other. Everything else was stacked floor to ceiling. She never hoarded trash. It was always useful things, just things she was probably never going to use herself, but needed to have just in case. And food. Oh Lord, did that woman hoard food. My grandmother grew up during the Great Depression, constantly having to move around and leave everything she owned behind each time. Once she grew up and was able to create her own stability, she started hoarding. My mother says my grandmother started hoarding when my mother was a teen, and never stopped. Most of the things she would collect came from Goodwills, flea markets, garage sales, and pretty much unwanted second-hand crap. Something else I feel as though I should mention. I am the youngest child of 3. My 2 older siblings are my half-siblings. My sister and I share the same father, and brother and I share the same mother. My brother was around 4 or 5 when my parents met, meaning I wasn't the first grandchild my grandma had, but I was the only one she seemed to like. My siblings were never invited to her house, or really welcome to be there at all. My grandmother treated my siblings as though they didn't exist. Me, on the other hand, she would call my parents constantly to ask when we were going to be in the valley next, and if they would like to bring me to her house to spend the weekend. Neither of my other siblings ever stayed the night at Grandma's house. I feel as though the above information is important as to why I'm making this post. I was 13 at the time I brought him home. I had spent a weekend with that grandmother while my parents were staying at another relative's house not far from there. This was pretty normal, as stated before. I seemed to be the only family member she liked. Well, that weekend my grandmother gave me a music box / porcelain doll. I collected porcelain dolls, so I didn't think anything of it, the fact that she was giving me a new one. She told me to take care of him, that he's very special, and I needed to be sure to give him the love and attention he deserves. I was instructed to wind and play him at least once a month. Okay, whatever you say, Grandma. My mother and her ended up having a falling out, and I was told that if I wanted to see her or speak to her, I would have to find my own way of doing so. But as far as my mother was concerned, she was dead to our family. Still to this day I have no idea what their falling out was over. Now there's a whole lot to be covered between the time period of 13 to 18. The strangest of them all was at 15 I had to have an emergency neck surgery. A mass had appeared and started cutting off blood flow to my brain. If I hadn't have gone to the hospital for my neck being sore, I could certainly have died. Fast forward to Mother's Day 2011. I'm 18 at the time. Every 4 years or so, my grandmother's birthday would fall on Mother's Day, and did so on that day. I hadn't talked to her for a few years at that point, since I wasn't allowed to use the house phone to contact her, and for the longest time no one would give me her phone number. So I got her number and called her, and the conversation went like this. Hey Grandma, it's me. I just wanted to call you to wish you a happy birthday and Mother's Day. Do you have anything special going on? Oh goodness, I thought I'd never get to speak to you again. I'm surprised that bitch mother of yours let you call me. Yeah, I'm sorry I haven't called sooner, but I've really missed you, Grandma. How would you feel about me making a trip up there to see you soon? Oh, that would be wonderful. We can finally talk about all the things your mother has been hiding from you. She's been lying to you your whole life about who you really are. Don't deny it. Embrace it. You need to confront your mother and demand she tell you what she's been keeping from you. Oh, okay, Gran. So, what do you think of me coming to see you soon? I'd really like to catch up with you. I've missed you so much. Do you think you'd come to my high school graduation next month? Yes, you should definitely come see me. Can you come this next weekend? No, I don't think I can, but I'll try. After a very long silence. Do you still have him? Who? The jester? Yeah, I do. Why? Bring him with you. Oh, alright, Grandma. Well, I'll have to go soon because I'm making dinner tonight. But I love you, and I'll call you again soon. I attempted to call her again a few weeks later to see if she could attend my graduation. She didn't answer. My other phone calls over the next few months were unanswered as well. She died that December. Which brings me to my whole point of this post. The doll she gave me I've had for 10 years now. I've had a lot of unexplainable experiences I'd prefer to keep private, but I'd be willing to share those more on a one-to-one basis if they could possibly help. But as far as the noticeable activity that I and my partner witnessed are as follows. Night terrors start. If it's not in our bedroom or sleeping space, like the absolute worst I've ever had. Things go missing and turn up in places they should not have been in. It will go through months of sitting alone on a shelf, not being wound or played, but will constantly play single notes or small parts of the song. And then there's our new dog. He can't stand it. He will wake up from a dead sleep and start blinking and growling like crazy at it. I have a video of him doing so. I have depression and think back to when I first started to feel the way I do. It was around the time the doll came into my life. I guess what I'm getting at is I need help, figuring out if there really is something going on or if I'm just crazy. Help to bring him and myself to peace again. There's a whole lot that I wanted to say but haven't been able to, and would be more than willing to talk to someone if they think they can help. And please, don't recommend Sage. You don't think I've tried that? I am a collector of vintage and antique items, including mid-century fashion dolls. I usually purchase them from thrift stores, estate sales, or very occasionally on Craigslist. Recently I purchased a group of 1960s Barbie dolls that were a real bargain. I know the woman had a great knowledge of vintage dolls since she used to sell them on eBay, so she knew what they were worth. Still, I didn't question why she was selling them at such a low price. I was delighted with said purchase and couldn't wait to fix them up for my collection. A few days later, my bedroom suddenly became infested with flies. It was absolutely insane how many of these dirty little beasts filled my room. They seemed bent on driving me mad, as they were constantly buzzing in my face or landing on or over me. Some folks say that flies are a bad omen that signify the coming of bad times. These flies were of plague-like proportions, and were also a true enigma of why they arrived when they did. Around the time, I became very ill with flu-like symptoms. The weirdest part of this illness was a strange feeling like my brain was burning. I also experienced severe headaches that included crazy brain fog that felt like torture. It's hard to articulate exactly what the feeling was, but I've never experienced such an odd feeling in my head. It was so intense that ending my life crossed my mind. One last oddity to add to the pile. Usually I'm a very vivid dreamer with dreams that always have the same basic elements. After the purchase, my dreams have become dark and muddled. When I wake up I feel exhausted as if I haven't slept. So why did I equate these mysterious happenings with the recent purchase of the dolls? I know it's not entirely logical, but it's just a strong feeling I have. What should I do? Could an inanimate object be cursed or bring bad luck? Maybe that's why she sold them for so cheap. I just want to add that I do not practice the occult nor believe in ghosts. The reason being is that after my father passed away quite recently, I saw no sign of him. My best friend also ended his own life some years before that, and I felt that if I were ever to experience a spiritual visit, he would have given me some sign. I just want to believe, but I can't. I regularly go thrift shopping in my small town in Ontario, Canada. About 3 weeks ago, I went to the Salvation Army to pick up some vintage finds. I sometimes go into the housewares and art section to see if there's anything worth picking up to resell. And that is when I saw it. I had always been interested in creepy, unsettling, and dark things, and this painting immediately caught my attention. It was as if it were begging me to take it home. I was overwhelmed by this sense of urgency. I needed this painting now for whatever reason. The more I looked at it, the more I discovered new details. It's not a particularly nice painting. It has a very unrefined feel to it. But it was not the style that drew me in. It was the subject matter. It was so odd. I ended up adding the painting to my cart and continued to shop around. The painting ended up costing me only $2, which I considered a deal, since it came in a very nice old frame. I had it in my room for a few days before I noticed strange things happening. I live alone in an apartment, and it's generally quiet and peaceful. This all changed by the third day that I owned the painting. At first, harmless things were happening, and I thought nothing of them. Instances included cupboards opening, things falling, lights flickering. I just attributed the cupboards opening to me being forgetful, things falling as me not properly putting things back, or the light bulbs as needing replacing. By the sixth day, the nightmares started happening. In my nightmares, some dark figure approaches the side of my bed from my closet. While I'm stuck in some sort of sleep paralysis, not being able to do anything while it comes towards me. It gets closer until it's at the side of my bed. It looks at me while frozen, but doesn't even have eyes. I've had this recurring dream for 5 or 6 nights since I obtained the painting, all with the figure from the painting coming to visit me. After the first nightmare, I knew that these incidents had something to do with the painting. The energy coming off it was just dark, and it got darker and darker until I was so uncomfortable that I moved the painting out of my room. Here is where things get even weirder. I decided to investigate the painting further and take it out of its frame. As soon as I took it out of the frame, this smell enveloped my house. The painting never smelled prior. It was only when I removed the glass and wood frame that the stench of sulfur came over everything. It was putrid. I immediately noticed the back of the painting, and it is terrifying. After the 5th or 6th nightmare, I moved the painting to my basement storage locker at the bottom of the apartment complex. The dreams have stopped, but the cabinets opening and stuff like that still happen. Something else started too. I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night to hearing what sounds like scratches in my front door. When I go and investigate, there's nothing there. I've asked my neighbors, but they don't hear anything. In addition to the paranormal occurrence, my health has also taken a hit since I got the painting. I've been feeling unwell, run down, and depressed all the time. I tried telling people about it, but no one really believes me. The only one who has said anything that makes me feel like I'm not crazy is when my dad came over and took a look at the painting. The first words to come out of his mouth were, "Damn, that's dark." The painting itself has a very odd subject matter. This is what I see. Please let me know if you see anything different. There is a dark figure sitting in a wooden chair staring into a mirror with its hand on its head, almost as if it is in shock. In the mirror, it is not the person's reflection, rather another dark figure standing in it. It almost looks like its hands are cut off. Its arms are long, and there looks to be blood on the mirror. The walls are cracked and show plaster. There are also scratch marks with the same red on the mirror as on the wall. I'm wondering if this meant the person in the chair is trying to escape. There is also a box, which kind of reminds me of a Dybbuk box, in the corner of the room. Possibly the most disturbing part is the upside-down family portrait. I have no idea what it all means. Hopefully someone can give me some advice on how to remove this spirit from disturbing my home and my dreams. The artist is unmarked. There's no date either. If anyone has seen any similar paintings or styles, I'd love to get in touch. I want my life to go back to normal. I'm sure some of you people will probably tell me to throw it out or burn it, and I would. But I have this irrational fear that whatever spirit resides in that painting will get angrier. We got this old vintage clock a while ago. It's been in storage for over a year. We moved recently, and my dad bought the clock and decided to hang it on the wall about a month ago. No one in my family liked the clock but my dad, so we kept it. So 2 nights ago I was talking to my dog about going to the bathroom, around 11 to 12 at night. As I take him out, I sit down and chill on the sofa. All of a sudden I hear this ticking, and my first thought process is, what's making the noise? So I go and investigate. I walk up to the clock and it's moving. It's ticking and moving, and the glass pane that usually covers it is wide open. I know nothing about this clock, so I literally just look at it and go, that's weird. Go to sleep and don't dream of anything as normal. The next day comes, and later that night my mum announces that she's going to sage the house. She hasn't done it in a while, but with all the stress and stuff that our family's been going through, we needed it. Before she starts to sage, I suddenly remember about the clock. Oh Mum, by the way, I heard the old clock ticking yesterday. She tells me that it's not possible, that it's a wind-up clock. So I was confused. My little sister, who's 10, then hears what I say, and comes up to me like, oh, I heard it ticking too. We heard the ticking at different times in the night. So immediately my mum is just, get the clock out of my house, and leaves the clock outside and sages. That night, both my parents have nightmares about my younger sister. My mum describes how she's in my little sister's room and there's a round table in it. It has letters as if it's a Ouija board, and there's a voice that starts to speak to my mum, telling her, I like it here. Please let me stay. I like your house. Now my mum is very sensitive to presences and stuff. There are times where she grabs things at Goodwill and flinches and tells me that whoever had it was bad. She's been in a car my dad bought to resell and literally started to cry and told him she'd never go in it again. When he got the papers for the car, it came with a title and the owner's death certificate. He died in that car. Anyway, my mum has experienced stuff getting out of her house due to the dumbass things my dad buys and brings to them. She begins to pray very strongly and tries to get him out. The thing comes back, and once again my mum gets him out, imagining as if she were burning him. The thing returns again, and my mum starts praying so hard that she starts to wake up from her dream. It started to try and negotiate with my mum, trying to let itself stay, but my mum said no. My mum has this thing where she imagines a beam of light coming out of the heavens, and that's what happened when her dream ends. When she wakes up, her entire right arm is cold. My dad is now awake because he heard her screaming and chanting, and immediately my mum asks what time it is, and it's 3 a.m. The witching hour, you know. My mum starts to curse and say, damn it, and then tries to go back to sleep. And my dad had woken up and goes to sleep and proceeds to have a nightmare about my sister. So today comes and my dad is going to get rid of the clock. He goes to work, putting it in his van, and starts to work on his van, which he's going to sell in a few hours. The next 4 to 5 hours were the most difficult time that he's ever had with the van in a while. He cut his finger, burnt it, and nothing was going well. Eventually his deal happened and everything was alright on his end, but once he had finished with repairing it, he opens the slider door, and he forgot he left the clock in the van. That was what was causing so much trouble. So all of that happened today with that clock, and now, just an hour ago, I was telling them again how exactly I came up to the clock and everything, and it was just ticking. I saw it tick. The glass pane was wide open. My parents looked at me as if I'd grown 2 heads. You see, the glass pane was locked with a key that no one has. My dad had been looking for it earlier that week, but no one found it. All 3 of us go around in a circle asking if one or the other opened it, but none of us did. We never even found the key. So I don't even know what was up with that. There is also no way my little sister could have opened it, because she's too short. So in conclusion, we have no idea how this clock somehow opened on its own, not to mention all the weird stuff that happened to our family. As you can imagine, once it was gone and Mum saged the house, everything went back to normal. This happened around 7 to 8 years ago. I remember the events leading up to this in great detail, and I'm interested in what other people think of the situation. At the time, I was 17 to 18, and I had a little Russian doll on my bookshelf that my mum got me from one of the friends she made in Russia when she studied abroad there. It's super tiny, about 3 inches tall, a female dressed in traditional Russian clothes. The doll was sat atop a shelf, about 3 to 4 inches back, and behind something else. Now, ever since I was little, the hallway upstairs creeped me out. My bedroom is up at the end of the stair hallway, and the hallway leads up to my bathroom. In order to go to the restroom at night, I have to go through the end/corner of the hallway. It kind of started subtly. Occasionally, around the ages of 6 or 7, I would wake up to find something had fallen. I had a 3D heart puzzle on my makeup box, and I would wake up to find it had fallen on my dresser and split right down the middle. Sometimes I would wake up to find the tiny doll lying face up on the floor. This is where I started to get a little bit creeped out. The doll was set further back than it was tall. If it fell over, wouldn't it have fallen onto the floor face down? Why always face up? This is where things got really freaky, and I'm still really creeped out by it all these years later. I was heading upstairs to the aforementioned bathroom, and I turned on the lights to the hallway before I walked up. Like I said, the hallway always freaked me out. And the lights turned on and then flashed out. When I flipped the switches off, the lights flashed back on and then off again. I figured, it's an old house, whatever, and went to the bathroom anyway. The bathroom light switch did the same thing. I got frustrated by this, so I started to angrily flash the light switch on and off very quickly. During one of the bursts of light, I saw a young man in his early 20s standing directly behind me, with straightish black hair nearing his shoulders. He didn't feel super scary or dangerous or anything, but I still panicked, told my dad that the lights were having issues, and when he flipped the hallway and bathroom light switches, the lights turned on with no issue. I still feel that awful creepy feeling of being watched in the hallways to this day. I felt like I've been watched my whole life while in that hallway. The heart puzzle and the doll started to fall a little more frequently after that. I was clearly not happy about it, so when my parents were gone, I yelled for whatever it was to leave me alone. After that, the puzzle and doll stopped falling. I even moved the tiny doll downstairs and out of my room. The awful part of the top hallway still gives me this super creepy feeling though, like I'm being watched. I've had friends who've stayed in the guest room downstairs and say that they felt like someone was watching them all night, and that they heard lots of creaking noises. What this comes down to is, am I safe? I mean, I've grown up in this house, but is this ghost/spirit/whatever biding its time? Or is it all my superactive imagination? Is it just me being paranoid about seeing things that aren't there? Or is this a nice ghost? Or are there other things I need to worry about? I'm just scared. Scared of being judged. I'm curious what people think. Did the ghost actually leave? Was he not real to begin with? Do I need to worry? When my sister was quite young, our grandmother bought her a porcelain doll. The doll wasn't anything special. It wasn't an antique or anything like that. It was just one that you would buy at a novelty shop. It was on a stand and couldn't be moved without possibly breaking it. She had this doll for a few years before my parents divorced. After the divorce, we moved in with our mother in a poor neighborhood in Alton, Illinois. The house felt strange. It also had a strange smell. My sister put the doll in one of the built-in cabinets in the wall, and that's where she stayed for the first few days. At first, we started to notice small changes about where she was or how she was positioned differently than she was before. She would be on the shelf facing the living room most of the time, and when you left the room and came back, she would be rotated a different way. Okay, we thought. Mum's probably messing with us. We largely ignored it, but it kept happening. After a few more months, the doll started ending up in different places in the house. She would be on the cabinet, and when you came back from another room, she would be on the dining room table, or she would be on one side of the table in the living room by the couch, or on the floor facing the television. We had made a lot of new friends in the neighborhood, and when they came over, I would show them what the doll would do, and without a hitch, I would put her somewhere, and we would leave the room for a few minutes and return, and she would now be in a different spot. Now, I'll go back to saying that we thought my mum was messing with us at first, but Mum was at work a lot of those days, and we skipped school plenty of times to stay home, so it wasn't Mum doing this. One day, we decided to mess with the Ouija board I had in my closet. I don't remember if we bought it or it was just there. The messages coming back from the questions we asked identified a spirit called Candy Zimmerman. She didn't say much, but I also being able to connect with her myself by the board. She said she had a crush on me. One day I skipped school again, but my sister went, and I always walked with my buddy down to the bus stop and hung out with him before heading back home, and I watched my sister get on the bus. My mum worked early, so she wasn't there that day. Then I went back to the house and locked up, and since I was still tired, I opted to go back to bed. The next thing that happened, I will never forget. I heard a knock at my bedroom door. It startled me awake, but I ignored it and laid my head back down. After a few minutes, there was another knock, this one much louder and in a rhythm. I still also remember to this day. Think shave and haircut rhythm, but different. This time I was freaked out and laid there with my eyes open for I don't know how long. The door to my bedroom was heavy, and it always stuck in warmer weather, which it was. The next thing that happened was the door popped open just enough for me to see out into the hallway, but not enough for me to see over the edge of my bed. I sat up in bed and looked down on the floor, and there standing at the entrance to my room was that doll on its stand, looking at me. Before the fear set in, I was actually pissed off. Did my sister come back? Was she messing with me? I got up, took the doll by the hair, and carried her out into the living room. No one was there. I checked the front door and it was locked. I barged to my sister's room and no one was there. I barged into my mum's room. No one was home. At this point I was freaking out. I took the doll to my sister's room and threw her in the closet. I buried her in a stack of bags full of old clothes and boxes of junk and shut the door. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the front porch, waiting for Mum to come home. It never happened again, and I made sure to have a friend or local Wiccan bind the Ouija board which she kept. We moved out of the house a year later, and after a few more paranormal incidences. As for the doll, after we moved back in with my father, she was in my bedroom closet for about 5 years. One day we cleaned it out and threw her away. Was the doll haunted? I don't know. It could have just been that house, and whatever it was, moving things around. My brother used to live with our aunt for a few years. My youngest cousin, who was a little girl back then, was made to share a room with her older sister, so my brother could use her room. My little cousin's room was filled with dolls of all shapes and sizes, as in the only space in the room without one was the bed and a few steps leading to it. As expected, this creeped out my brother all the time, and he would take his time to reposition them in a way that their backs faced him instead. But without fail, every time he woke up, all the dolls were facing him again. He said there were even 3 or 4 dolls that always ended up sitting beside his head, even if he had put them away in the cabinet or locked them out of the room. At first we tried brushing it off by saying it couldn't have been our cousins playing a prank on him, until it went on even when he was alone in the house for days. He got so used to it didn't bother him anymore after a few months, as it happened to him until the day he moved out 2 years later. My aunt and cousin said they'd never experienced anything remotely weird in that room, so it was clear they had a preference for my brother. I was in Louisiana 2 years ago. I was in an antique store and came across a case of dolls close to the floor. I looked inside, and a doll literally blinked in front of me, without me touching it or anything in the vicinity. Fully upright, as the eyes open and close when laying down for some of these. I came back to Louisiana to visit family, and I went back 2 years later and purchased the doll. Maybe it was a mistake. This doll had very quickly began doing strange things. Full body apparitions, loud noises upstairs when no one was there, and making me itchy when I was around it. It also brings joy when it's not doing weird stuff, and it blinks its eyes in full view and isn't subtle at all. I sleep with the doll as I would rather it be closer to me where I can see it at night, rather than somewhere I can't. I believe it to be harmless. It's from the 60s and it's a little Dutch boy. Looks like he's wearing home-sewn clothes and hand-whittled clogs. Does anyone have advice on what I should do? I really don't know. But there's a bit more. I thought about getting rid of the doll. I couldn't sleep for 4 days after sharing the first experience that I had. I was always looking around behind my shoulder and was scared beyond belief. I didn't want to get rid of it on my grandma's property, so I had to keep it until I was somehow able to dispose of it. I saw a full-body apparition several times. It looked like a human, but fully flesh. It was almost like a hairless cat, dirty, and seemed a bit bloody. Like I said, This was in the human shape, so it was extremely terrifying. Once I found an opportunity, I ridded myself of it. I drove into the country and found a tree with a hole in it, covered the doll in holy oil and left. My great-grandmother just so happened to have blessed oil by the Pope. Not exactly sure which one though. After that, everything went back to normal. That antique shop seemed to have many seemingly haunted objects. Before I left to return to Georgia, I made sure to swing by the shop to say goodbye. I looked on the floor and saw a very old flat doll with a worn-away print on the top, being held down by a large brass cross, and I got a shiver down my spine. For my 5th birthday, my uncle got me. I was only about 4 years old at the time. I was playing hide and seek with my big sisters. I had thought about hiding in my parents' closet, but decided to hide under their bed instead. I was facing into the room so that I could see when the seeker came in. That's when I saw my middle sister Betty come in and hide in the closet. For some reason the door was already open, so she left it that way and hid in the back corner. I was small enough, and the bed was high enough off the ground, that I could put my chin on my hands and have my head straight, rather than having to press an ear to the ground. The counting finished, and my eldest sister Nora began her mission seeking. Not even a minute into the search, I'm looking at the closet and my mum still had her wedding dress hanging. I watched as the arms of the dress lifted at the same time, and the dress jerked on its hanger towards Betty. She screamed and went running for our mum, and I wiggled my way out of my hiding place. I found everyone in the kitchen, Mum trying to placate my terrified sister, and the other sister with a look of bemused confusion on her face. Betty is trying to tell Mum what happened, but can't seem to get the words out. All I can remember her saying was dress, arms. I went over and tugged my mum's shirt to get her attention. Not now, she said, but I saw it. That got her attention. Saw what? Your dress. Its arms lifted up by themselves and it moved on the rail. That's why Betty's crying. Mum ushered us all down the room with her, and the dress was in the same place she'd seen it last, hanging limply and forlorn. You must have imagined it, Mum told me. But then why is Betty crying? I asked. Betty was standing in the doorway of the room, refusing to get any closer to the closet. How did you see if you were hiding? Mum inquired. So I wriggled my way back under the bed to show them, and had a very clear view up on the shelf into the closet. What I didn't know was that Betty had also seen a face, as if someone were wearing the dress and trying to reach out to her. There was a psychic living at the top of our street at the same time, so the next day we all trooped off to see her. She told Mum that it was our Nana, her mother who had died the previous year. We didn't believe her though, because we'd seen Nan before, and she'd never done anything to scare us. We never did find out who or what it really was. Betty still won't talk about it and refuses to acknowledge any paranormal happenings in that house. There are a lot of stories from that house, but nearly 30 years later, Nan still comes to visit. In fact, all my grandparents still visit. I know who it is by the scent. Potpourri for my mother's mum, burnt toast for her dad, tobacco for her dad's dad, and for his mum, her favorite perfume. My aunt has always been a lover of creepy things. She likes gory, spooky, haunted things. She's sort of the lovable oddball of the family. She's always been crazy about these things called living dead dolls. For those of you who don't know what they are just terrifying looking collectible dolls. Basically, purchasable nightmare fuel. She had bought a bunch of them and had them on display in her home. I've never been a fan of dolls, let alone ones meant to be scary, so this creeps me out a lot. She ran into some financial trouble and decided to start selling things on eBay to make some extra cash for bills. As much as it broke her heart, she decided to sell one of her more popular living dead dolls on eBay. Almost immediately after she posted the doll, there was an offer. She gladly said her goodbyes, boxed up the doll and mailed it. No problem. A week or so later, she got the box back in the original packaging she sent it out in, but with a note saying undeliverable address, meaning she must have written it down wrong or it wasn't an acceptable place to deliver a package. My aunt figured it was just a spelling error and didn't think anything of it. She didn't open the package, she just put it in her closet. She went on eBay to try and contact the buyer, and to her surprise when she logged on, she already had a message from the buyer saying how she got the doll and how much she loved it and couldn't wait to brush her hair. She also described the doll in correct detail. Yes, there was also a picture of the doll on Amazon, and my aunt was pretty freaked out. To this day, she still hasn't opened the package. It's still just sitting in the closet. But a few weeks later, as a special Christmas gift, my aunt let me open the box. The doll was still inside. I am currently on vacation in Mexico. I have family here, my grandparents, 4 uncles and their family, and my family all live on the same street. We live on a ranch and the nearest airport is a 4-hour drive. When we arrive here, Uncle D picks us up, and on our way to our ranch, him and my dad were catching up. My uncle proceeds to tell him that currently they have been having some weird experiences with a doll, that the doll was haunting him and his family for a while. This included keeping them up all night by knocking on their windows and stuff. He also said that it was attacking people who were walking down the street late at night, and that a guy even tried to shoot it. Everyone was fed up about it and tried to set up a group to attack it. I was creeped out, but thought that maybe he was lying or joking around. We arrived, and for the first 2 days we slept at my aunt's house. This is because our house had recently been renovated. Those 2 nights, I wasn't able to sleep, and every time I closed my eyes I had a dream that I was being assaulted. I told my dad, and he decided that we should try and sleep in our own house. On our 3rd night there, we were walking down the street late at night to visit my grandparents, and my Uncle Jay was there. He was drinking and said that the doll was going to get us if we kept walking at night. He was drunk, so I dismissed the comment. Later that night, we came home and tried to sleep for the first time. I'm not gonna lie, the house feels really creepy at night. I can't walk down a long hallway that goes to an empty room because I feel some bad energy there. My room faces the big glass sliding door we have to the backyard. I always felt like someone was watching me there. We've been here for 3 weeks already, and yesterday my little cousin Jack was outside with us in the backyard. We were burning trash and he mentioned that the doll lived in the big tree in our backyard. He lives right next to us, and we don't have a gate separating our property from his. He says he can hear it cry at night, and one time he saw it when he was going to the restroom, as their restroom is located outside their house towards the backyard. I didn't believe him, but got spooked out, and that same night, Uncle D's son was playing Xbox with us. Cousin Jack was with us too, and my brother brought up that doll and said that Cousin Jack was lying to us. As soon as we mentioned it, Uncle D's son went pale and said he didn't want to talk about it. That spooked me out, because Uncle D said that the doll was haunting them. So, if it was true, his son had to know something about it. It scared him so much, and that's when I believed it. He got me thinking, and that's probably why at night I felt like something watches me. My room faces the glass door, and the tree is right in front of it. So, after a few days, we noticed our sink was smelling. Now, we were on vacation, so we weren't cooking, and everything in the sink was mainly cups or bowls of cereal. We went on a 3-day trip to Guatemala, as we were staying in Chiapas, so the dishes from that morning were left uncleaned for 3 days. When we came back, there was a rank smell coming from the sink. It smelled like rotten flesh, and we didn't know where it was coming from. I then cleaned the dishes, and hundreds of larvae started to crawl out the sink. Some people might think that it was us being dirty, but we never found what caused that reek. I didn't find any rotten meat or anything that the larvae were eating. Some people said it must have been the pipes or something in the walls, but the house is brand new, and the walls are made of brick and cement. As soon as the larvae came out, the smell went away. It was like a scene from a horror movie. We all left when we heard my cousin describing the muñeca differently. Someone said it was a mono or a monkey, so we concluded that it could have been a shapeshifter. I luckily never ran into it, but there have always been stories going around of unexplained things happening there. People say that they could have been made up stories because people are bored, whereas others say it's the truth. I've had my own experiences in there before. I've heard something with dark, heavy voice speaking to me in English when no one there speaks it. I've had dolls that I brought from the United States start moving when I leave them in that house. My brother claimed that he heard La Llorona before when he was coming home late. It could just be our imagination, but stuff does happen in Mexico. Because of my general interest in horror, and because they were appealing to me for a while, I collected dolls. It didn't matter what type. I had some porcelain ones, some pretty-looking horror movie-level dolls, that sort of stuff. They were generally creepy to the majority of people, and of course, they're haunted, was a joke that I often had. But I never had an issue with any of them. In fact, I thought they were all comforting. They all had names, and I had a history of picking them out, usually from antique shops, but I had 2 or 3 from a house sale after the owner passed away. On October 28, 2017, my parents were out of town, so my brother and I were home alone, and my dad sent me a picture of the coolest doll they found at this church thrift shop. The doll was the epitome of everything I liked. I loved clowns and circuses, and the soft pastel colors were my absolute favorite. So much so that I was writing a story at the time that reflected these interests. The doll was perfect. It felt like it was for me, like in that Coraline sort of way, but instead of looking like me, it was just something no one else could have wanted. In all honesty, I don't think my dad would buy it, but lo and behold, when my parents returned, I had a new doll to add to the collection. This was the first doll that I hadn't bought on my own or personally picked out, but I wouldn't expect it to matter. All of this happened, and I found out more things about the doll. One being that my parents bought it, and the cashier avoided touching it completely. On top of that, they said, "Oh, you're buying him." Honestly, that wasn't uncommon. I'd been given a doll for free before because it was in such bad shape. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Having some aversion to a creepy doll was nothing new. Another interesting factoid about this was that my father, who is very strongly a factual person and doesn't believe in ghosts even the slightest, said he felt this doll before he saw it. To say the least, my mum wasn't happy he went through with the purchase when she found that out. I remember vividly how excited I was to hold it for the first time. I got no negative feelings from it. This was just a doll. I do remember that one of the first things I noticed was his lack of eyes. I figured it was an old one, and the eyes had fallen out. If anything, it just made me like him more. The creepy clown doll, who I never named, quickly found his spot on my shelf, and all was well. I don't even remember when I started to get a bad feeling. It started minimally, Small things like feeling uncomfortable around them, or that I didn't like them facing me when I was laying down at night. I was never uncomfortable with my dolls, and even when I didn't want to admit it, I wanted to be the weird girl who collected creepy dolls, but all of a sudden being around them made me anxious. I can only explain it as a deep vibrating in my chest that was nothing but discomfort to be in my room. I ignored it for the longest time, but being in that room alone was invoking an anxiety in me that I haven't felt before or since. At some point, I started having progressively worse nightmares, a reoccurring theme that they were never far from real life. In fact, they usually took place exactly where I was at the time, whether it be my bed, the couch. They were where those nightmares would be so convincing, you'd be unsure whether you had woken up or not. I recall 2 nightmares in particular, one where I was laying in bed. The room was dark, but not so dark. I couldn't see anything. I was laying on my side facing away from the dolls and towards my closet. The door slowly opened, and there was a really big doll just standing inside of it, bigger than people-sized. It looked at me, but only its eyes moved, and for a moment, that's all I saw before I awoke. This was my first experience with what I can only identify with sleep paralysis, but I don't know if I was actually unable to move or not, or if I was just too scared of what might happen if I did. Of course, nothing was in my closet. It sounds like a cheesy nightmare for sure, but to me this was terrifying. It made it hard to breathe, and made my stomach ring. The other nightmare was when I was taking a nap on the couch, and in the dream I woke up and went to my room. When I went inside, I looked at the dolls and they were moved. Then I woke up again, and this repeated. Each time the dolls became more and more scattered, laying on the floor or completely broken altogether. Something was moving them. It couldn't have been an accidental nudge before I awoke. It looked like something had angrily shoved them all off the shelf. Eventually I did wake up, and the fear I felt as I slowly went to my room was unlike anything I had felt before. I walked as slowly as I possibly could, as if that was going to help with anything. I was just scared of the possibility that they might have been moved. I knew that if I went in my room and the dolls were out of place, something was really screwed up. I turned on every light I could. I was visibly shaking with fear, but nothing was moved. It almost felt like I was being mocked. The nightmares continued for a while with no attempts to be fixed. If anything, I just made them worse. Staying awake when I definitely shouldn't have been. Avoiding getting my REM cycle because, due to my research, I found that's when you had nightmares, which I didn't want. I can't remember any other specific nightmare, but a lot of it was just the fear and anxiety that accompanied being in my room. Being near the doll and how uncomfortable it made me. My dad even said he went in my room to get a pair of headphones, and his hip, which has been broken since I was about 8 or so, was suddenly full of a shooting pain, and when he left the room it stopped. It was those small, strange encounters that made it so out of the ordinary. I would do anything to get away from that room when I could, and I didn't even realize it anymore. It was my subconscious telling me that I needed to fear my own space. It was my own subconscious telling me I wasn't safe there anymore, and I usually tried to listen to it. After New Year's is when I put all the dolls away. The night before I had decided to move all the dolls out of my room. I hadn't focused on the fear of any specific one, so I just moved them all out. That same night, I awoke and moved them back into my room. I don't know why, I just felt like they needed to be back. They couldn't be sitting out there. I just needed to move them back in. Apparently that morning I had been acting strangely, and eventually my mum and I moved the dolls into a box and into the attic, after I broke down explaining to her how scared I had been feeling about those dolls lately. My mum is a very spiritual person, so she was open to helping me put the dolls away. I haven't had an issue since, but I did do some more research on the doll a few months ago. For a while, I didn't like talking about them or even thinking about them, so I hadn't even looked at pictures of them. These were all things I found out quite a while later. A few things. For one, I finally looked back on all of this, and the one doll that did have eyes. In the picture my father sent me, which I needed to scroll through 2 years of messages to find, that doll, he had an eye. Of course, it could have fallen out during the drive. I didn't doubt the possibility, but I didn't push the doll's eye out. They were gone as soon as I had him the first time. Maybe it's a coincidence, or I'm thinking about it too much. On top of that, I couldn't find any other dolls that quite looked like it. My girlfriend and I found a few online that looked similar, but they were never an exact match. The colors were all wrong, the face shape wasn't quite the same, and I still haven't found any that do resemble the doll. I even tried reaching out to the manufacturers that created dolls that I thought looked like it the most, and assumed maybe there just weren't many pictures online, but I never got a way of contact. All I know is that it still deeply disturbs me when I think about that doll. This happened when I was around 15 or 16. I still remember the craziest details, but this is not one of them. Since I was a kid, my biological mother had sort of shoved religion down my throat. So over the years of not seeing her and just living with my dad, I had developed my own belief in myself and my independence. Ghosts, spirits, and energy weren't really on my mind at the time. I was always interested in horror movies and stuff like that. My dad was on a trip to Mexico. He had called me one day after I got home from school and asked me if I wanted anything, as my dad and stepmom would usually buy me a little traveler gift or something when they went on business trips. I said yes, and asked him what the options were, whether it be a keychain or a poster. He said he had stopped in a shop that was sort of deserted, like it was being shut down or going out of business, and it was located in the middle of nowhere. He said that there was some old paintings, and being into art at the time, that really piqued my interest. I only remember the description of the one painting that he had described, solely because of the occurrence that had happened once it was in my possession. It had a very old, dark wooden frame, and it wasn't super smooth, but wasn't rough or beat up or anything like that. The painting itself looked like it was on white marble, and what the painting is that almost a cartoonish traditional skeleton dancing in a graveyard wearing an outfit that Shakespeare might wear. The painting overall looked really cool, but as soon as I got it, something was off, and it wasn't super noticeable. But when you look at it, it just was unsettling in the slightest. The first occurrence I had with this painting was the first week after I had owned it. It was hanging over my door, and may I add that at the top of the painting there is an extremely super thick rope that is used so I can put a nail there so that it can hang. I had gotten out of the shower after I got home from school, and I walked into my room. As soon as I walked through the door, the painting fell, and I felt the wind from the painting fall behind me, and it felt like it was a few inches away. Any other day I would have just dismissed it and thought about how crappy it would have been if the painting had hit me, but I didn't realize that there was something extraordinary going on. So I put my clothes on, got a stool, and spent about 3 minutes making sure the painting was not going to come off the nail. When I got off the stool, I gently pushed the side of the painting to watch it swing back and forth to ensure that it would stay put. I had to make sure that the only way the rope would come off the nail was if you were to push directly up and pull it off. I left and walked into my bathroom to take a leak and pick up my clothes from the floor, and when I walk in, back through the door into my room, the painting fell off and hit me in the shoulder. This had honestly freaked me the hell out on many different levels, and it doesn't even stop there. I picked up the painting from the floor and then tossed it in the closet with all my dirty clothes. And being at about 15 or 16, obviously it was just a pile on the floor. After about a month, I'd told one of my friends about what happened with the painting, and to this day something tells me that I probably shouldn't have told anyone about this, because nothing had even happened until I brought it up with him. The next morning before I had to go to school, it was extremely early, and I had woken up and couldn't get back to sleep. And it was before any of my parents woke up. I couldn't get back to sleep because I didn't realize that my instinct was picking up that there was something else in the room with me. I sat up and just sat there and stared at the closet doors. I sat there for about 5 minutes, debating on whether or not I wanted to see what had sounded like scratching coming from the inside of my closet. I threw up my blankets, pulled my feet onto the floor, but as soon as I stood up, the moving in the closet stopped. At this point, it was reacting to the sound of me, which was scary and terrifying because I realized that the painting was in there, and from what had just happened the month before. I stood there for a solid minute just staring at the door, and when my anxiety got so high, I just ran up to the door and threw it open. Nothing. Just a pile of clothes, and no, the clothes weren't a month old. I just kept the painting on the floor because I really didn't want to touch it. I just stood there looking into the closet and down to the floor when I noticed the corner of the painting. As soon as I made eye contact with it, there was an inhumane and grotesque, deep-pitched growl that emanated from the closet. And the scariest thing about all this was that I could feel the sound vibrations in the floor and in my chest, and there wasn't even anything there. I was feeling the vibrations from something I couldn't even see that was making the noise. I ran out the room and went downstairs for the remainder of the hour that I had, until I had to actually get up for school, and sat on the couch watching TV in the kitchen with all the lights on downstairs. After this happened, my mental health rapidly declined, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety disorder, and ADD, all of which I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with regardless. It just felt like when I was home, these feelings intensified by 10. My parents didn't believe me, so I gave the painting to my dad and told him to put it in storage and that I didn't ever want to see it again. About a year later, and a quarter, I was 17. I had switched rooms and moved into my sister's old room because she had moved out. I'd put the painting up on the wall, but was only there a week until I had an experience where I woke up with my body facing the wall and couldn't move. I'd passed out and left my door open and heard something had started from the stairs and then began to walk through the hallway and into my bedroom. As soon as the steps stopped by the side of my bed, I could move, but nothing was there. My family owns a big dog and a small dog, but I know it wasn't the dog's, because when they walk on the wooden floor, you can hear the sound of nails, and it's very high-pitched. I haven't seen the painting since after that happened. I saged my entire house and hit a dip in my mental health again. It was messed up and evil. I was paranoid, and my parents thought I was just lying, since I was also dealing with the issues between me and them. Safe to say, I never want to see that painting again, for fear of what it might do. I've always been fascinated with haunted items, but never found the courage to buy one until recently. I purchased a haunted doll on eBay. The doll's name was Violet, and she didn't have a crazy backstory. She had long blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. She was the perfect choice, or so I thought. Violet arrived in my mailbox on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She looked even more beautiful in person than in pictures. I was excited to have her in my possession and eager to see if I would experience anything paranormal. But I had no idea what I had gotten myself into. I sat Violet on my antique dresser in my bedroom and went about my day like normal. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. I went to bed and woke up the next morning. Still nothing. The next night, however, everything changed. I went to bed around my usual time. During the night, I heard a loud noise. I live in an apartment, so I figured it was the people above me causing a ruckus. I shut my eyes and drifted back off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and looked directly at Violet. Her legs were crossed. I didn't cross her legs. No one else had been in my apartment to cross her legs. I freaked out and hurried off to work. When I arrived home that evening, I went back into my bedroom to relax. Violet's legs were uncrossed. I hadn't uncrossed them. I had left them crossed and didn't touch her. What was happening? How was a doll crossing and uncrossing their legs on its own? Was I losing my mind? I went to bed that night with worry. I was worried about what I would wake up to. Would Violet's legs be in a different position? I awoke that morning to the sound of my alarm buzzing. I immediately looked over to my dresser and Violet wasn't there. I live alone. No one had been in my apartment. Where was Violet? I jumped up out of bed and started looking all around my room. I glanced over to my bed and Violet was there. Violet was laying in my bed staring up at the ceiling. Had she been in my bed all night? How did she get there? I ran out of my bedroom, grabbed my keys and ran outside. I'm currently sitting in a McDonald's parking lot near my apartment complex, typing this. I didn't even want to be sitting in the driveway of my apartment because I'm so freaked out. How did Violet get into my bed? Is she playing games with me? Or am I losing my mind? I'm terrified to go back in there and find Violet, wherever she may be next. I contacted the lady that sold me the doll and she said absolutely no returns. A part of me wants to get rid of her, while another is scared to do so. I don't know what to do. This story took place when I was around 8 years old, in my old neighborhood. I was next door neighbors with my best friend, Alex. We both went to the same school and always hung out every day after. One day, I was bringing my Nintendo 64 to his house so that we could play together. Once I got it into his house, his uncle was there watching TV, so we couldn't use it. Today I now know that he wasn't his uncle, because my older sibling, which knew Alex's older sibling, told me that his parents rented out rooms to random people from their original hometown, so the uncle was just a random stranger from out of the country. He told us to go into his shed to search for an extra TV, so we opened the shed and started searching. We found an older TV, but we could use it. Then something started moving all the things around, and we thought it was a rat, so we didn't mind at first. Then we heard laughter, something so scary that I tried to leave, but Alex told me not to worry. We kept searching around for the laughter, and eventually found this one male doll that was around 2 feet long. It was all torn and battered, so we figured it was just broken. We sat it down and decided to go hook up the TV in his room. We played for a while until his uncle left the house for food and his parents were at work, so we were home alone. We started hearing noises at the house, but figured it was nothing. But then we heard the laughter. The doll was moving around the house carefully. which we saw through the small peek underneath the closed door. The doll was looking for something, probably us. We were both freaking out, but we knew we had to get away from the house. As we were leaving, we heard the doll laughing through the window. We stayed at my house all afternoon until his parents returned. Ever since that day, I've always experienced weird things at my friend's house, like having YouTube videos end abruptly and start playing other random things like clown videos, which I think is a cereal commercial from the 70s. I ignored all these weird signs for the rest of my childhood, and we recently met up, since we went to different high schools. Somehow the topic of the weird things was brought up, and I asked him if he remembered them. He said he did. But I wonder if this will be the end of the story. I certainly hope so. When I was a kid visiting New Orleans, my family went to a voodoo shop. I wish I could remember the name, but it wasn't one of the tourist attraction ones. It was hard to find and not like all the others. Anyway, I thought it'd be cool to buy this little black doll made from cloth that had no face or features, just black cloth in human shape, stuffed and sewn together. It was sold as a voodoo doll of death, and thinking back on it, I feel pretty dumb taking something like that home with me. Once back, many weird things started happening to my whole family, until we eventually moved because of it. Hearing whispering in my room late at night in an unintelligible language was common. I also heard an angry man say my name behind my ear as I was turning on the living room TV. I literally felt his breath. None of this my family believed when I would tell them. I was under 12, so it's understandable. What changed this and made us move the next day is this. My mum saw an orb come up to her face when she was almost sleeping, and she said she couldn't breathe for almost a minute while it was in her face. Then it flew into the corner of the room and disappeared. When we moved close by, and the new people in the house we made friends with started saying that their kids were hearing whispers at night, we never told them about this before when they mentioned it, which is the crazy part. I'm not certain if this is all tied to the doll or not, but other stories I've heard have made me think it might be. I'm 22, and as my mum was pregnant with me, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer. The only thing he ever got me was this little clown doll that was supposed to hang over my crib. When you pull the clown's leg down, it plays a little music box style song as it winds itself back up. Now I know this already sounds like a cheesy horror story, but let's stick with it. When I was a child, maybe 7 or 8, I used to have the clown hanging from the metal curtain tiebacks in my room, probably because I was too young to have read or watched it. But one night, my mom walked up the stairs and in my room while I was asleep, because the clown was playing its song, but it had its legs pulled down. Apparently it played for about 5 minutes, and I do remember my mom recording it on her old flip phone and showed me that morning. We actually found out later in the day that on that night, my great-grandma had passed away, so my grandfather's mum. My mum is super adamant it was her dad, sending some sort of signal, but I'd be interested to know what you guys think. Unfortunately, I'm a Goodwill addict, and I saw this gorgeous picture that I simply had to have. It was a whole $5, and when I took a closer look, it was a black and white puzzle that someone had put into a heavy-duty frame. A big cat sprawled out into the snow, with snow falling all around him, done in black and white in a steel frame. It was very beautiful. Anyway, I get it home and hanging it in my guest bedroom. My bestie comes to visit, and she is standing in the guest bedroom doorway getting ready to take a shower. I come over to the doorway, and we were there just gabbling, and something caught our eyes at the same time. The picture lifted up and away from the wall, and gently fell onto the carpet while propping itself up against the wall. She looks at me and asks if I had just seen that. I reply that I did. This picture/puzzle is very heavy. 2 zigzag brackets in the back to hang on 2 corresponding wall nails. I picked the picture up and made sure everything was secure. The brackets were perfectly fine. The nails were both still in the walls with no sign of stress. My bestie stays a few days longer and leaves. While she is with me, no other events occur, and after she leaves I get this floodlight on the closest door, and there are 0 lights from the window, and I'm standing in a pitch-black bedroom with a glaring bright light on the closet door. It lasted 1 week and disappeared. It was simply too odd. This experience happened about a month or 2 ago. My family and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and some of us sleep in the living room. I always work graveyard shift at a hotel from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. We had one of those cabinet mirrors that are not permanently attached, roughly 4x4, so it can easily be pulled up and moved elsewhere. Usually, it's best done with 2 people. Now for the experience. On a regular night, I was getting ready to head to work. I leave and everyone in the house is asleep. It's a school day, so most of them are asleep by 11. FYI, everyone in the house is female, and leaving me the only male. I head to work and come back in the morning. I go to my bedroom and notice the big mirror leaning against the wall. I found it a bit strange, but figured maybe my sisters wanted to move it so that they could use it to get ready, which would have been the first time them doing so if this were the case. So I asked one of my sisters, who was the only one getting ready, everyone else was still asleep, why she moved it, and she replied almost immediately saying, "I thought you moved it." I responded by saying, "Why would I move it? I just got here." She gave me a confused look. I then go to wake up my mum and other sister, and they both said that they had nothing to do with moving the mirror. So now I'm stuck. Who the hell moved the mirror? Factors to keep in mind. Everyone in the house was asleep, so no one is honestly capable of moving the mirror on their own but me. Everyone was in the living room at the time this happened, and the mirror was in the living room too. If someone physically moved it, how did they do it by not waking anyone up? There were all kinds of things in front of the mirror, makeup boxes, and not to mention a vase that was almost as large as the mirror itself. All of the stuff in front of it was still there, and they weren't even moved after finding the mirror in the room. So how did this person move it without moving the stuff that was in front of it? The walkway towards the bedroom is a bit crowded too, because we have this couch bed that pulls out, taking up most of the space, so you really have to squeeze through to get by. At this point, I really don't know who moved the mirror, because I truly believe that none of my family members moved it. There were only 3 people inside the house at the time, and I'm sure they had nothing to do with it. Possible scenarios? Someone came inside the house just to move the mirror? Obviously very unlikely, because 1, doors were locked and everyone in the house would have woken up to the sound of a door being opened. Plus, whoever this person was would have to have moved all the stuff in front of it too, which would have made a hell of a lot of noise. Or alternatively, something paranormal. And I honestly think that's what happened here. Like it literally moved or floated from the living room to my bedroom with no explanation at all. No one moved it. How did it happen? It really blows my mind. My sister has also seen a female in all white in the mirror while she was doing her makeup. This was on a day she was home alone. There are a handful of unexpected things that happen in our apartment, and sometimes it feels a bit uneasy, or the feeling that something is there. I don't know if it's just me being paranoid, but I do feel that way sometimes. Perhaps it's attached to the mirror. I live in a house with my great-grandparents, my grandma, my mum, and my brother. My great-grandparents got this house 50 years ago and had lived in it ever since. My grandpa passed away last October, and his stuff is currently in my closet. I stay in an old storage room, so everything that is not put to use is in my room. Ever since I got this mirror around Thanksgiving from my grandmother, crazy stuff has been happening. My grandmother got it from a kinda sorta not completely abandoned house. The landlord moved out, but left some of his stuff there, so my grandpa took it, which is where the mirror came from. My grandparents lived in a bungalow behind the house. When cleaning out the house, I saw the mirror and asked my grandmother if I could have it, because I thought it was pretty. I do not know how old the mirror is, but it is kind of worn down. Anyway, so the mirror was sitting on my bookshelf, because I hadn't hung it up yet. One day, I was cleaning my room, and the mirror literally flipped and landed in the middle of the room. There is no logical way that could have happened, because I did not make any movement that could have caused it to flip, and it went too far. It's almost as if someone pushed it. The mirror didn't crack, it was completely fine, so I didn't think much of it and put it back on my dresser so that it wouldn't fall again. About 2 weeks after that, my deodorant was sitting on my headboard and flipped and landed in the middle of my room. At the time, I was on the phone with my boyfriend, so I told him about it, put the deodorant back, and joke around a bit, and that was it. Now, we are going to talk about things that have recently happened. So me and my boyfriend have basically been stepping our relationship up a bit. And any time we talk about something like that, or we talk about it over the phone, weird stuff happens. I went to shower while I was Skyping him, and my phone started messing up, so the call ended. I ran out the shower and called him back, but it took me about 5 minutes. One night, after we were talking about things, it was around 3:30 a.m. He was asleep, and we were still on the phone. My closet door started wiggling back and forth, and that continued all night. I can't remember anything else that happened, because I've gotten so used to it by now. Tonight, I was just in bed, and a bottle that was on my headboard fell right on my head. Maybe it's because I was moving a lot, and it freaked me out, but I'm not sure. I was talking to 2 of my friends about it, and they told me someone's story about what happened at their house. My first friend said my Harlequin doll fell off my shelf dresser. It's old, and it has a huge mirror and 2 shelves on each side, and landed on my floor. So she picked it up and set it on the dresser. When she came back, it was sitting on my bookshelf. My other friend said she woke up randomly in the middle of the night, and she couldn't move, and saw a white figure in the corner of my room, and she started to cry. Both of them just informed me now about this tonight. I also have a porcelain doll that I got from my 5th grade dance as a prize, and I'm in 10th grade now. I do not know the history of the doll, but it had moved before. It's a doll with brown hair, and she's a bridesmaid. It started turning and moving of its own accord, so my mum took it and put it in the top of her closet, maybe the beginning of this year, and we haven't taken it out since. But I've been talking about it. Now I'm not sure if I want to take it out or not. I honestly do not know what to do at this point. I don't know what's going on, and it creeps me out. I'm scared to move it. I work for a non-profit, that helps mentally and physically disabled people live fulfilling lives. John and Chris are brothers. I work for the same company as Chris, but at a different house. There are several houses around the city and bordering area. He works at one that houses children. Only children. 4 of them, I believe. His story begins on a graveyard shift, which he was working with one co-worker, a middle-aged woman. The house has alarms on the doors and windows, which are alarmed during the night, to let them know if any kids are trying to leave when they shouldn't be. Chris was downstairs in the office. His co-worker was upstairs cleaning. Suddenly, all the alarms in the house went off, every door and window. He sprang up, assuming the clients were planning a mass breakout, as he would later refer to it. He yelled to his co-worker to head out one door, and he went out the other, frantically looking for whoever was outside. He saw one client standing beneath a tree, but not apparently in a hurry. He thought he recognized the client to be someone called Barry. "Barry, head back inside," he said, or something to that effect. He continued searching for the other clients, but after running around in a panic, found no one. He gave up and headed inside to reconvene with his co-worker. He said he found Barry, but no one else. She stunned him when she revealed that everyone was inside, having never left, including Barry. He said she must be mistaken. He was outside a big tree in the backyard. She wore her fear on her face when he insisted this. She explained how what he saw was in fact what staff of the house refer to as white dress, a ghostly woman wearing all white that seems to reside on the property and is often seen under that tree. Needless to say, he was surprised and confused and definitely creeped out. But the story doesn't end there. Sometime later, a client from another home, whom Chris was very close to, sadly died. He was sick for a while, and Chris was present for his final breaths in the hospital. He was wheelchair bound when he was alive, and later a client at the white dress home needed a wheelchair, temporarily while recovering from a slip and fall accident. They brought the wheelchair that used to belong to Kieran, and right away Barry began fixating on it. When it was no longer in use, Barry would take it for his own enjoyment. Staff took note of this and couldn't explain why he loved it so much. He would take it outside to a small hill, push it down the hill empty, and then return it to the top and do it over and over again. Barry is nonverbal, in that he can't speak with spoken language, but he does understand speech and communicates using gestures. One useful gesture has him select staff's left or right hand in a sort of this or that conversation. For example, he could hold out my hand and say, "Barry, do you want tacos for dinner tonight?" and identify it as left hand option. Or do you want burgers for dinner tonight? Right hand. And then he would choose. He also had a tick where he would hold his palm up to his face very close and sort of mumble into it. This is actually what Chris thought he saw when white dress was under the tree. He thought Barry was there doing that. This is important because Barry would often do this gesture when he played with the wheelchair. Staff got curious and thought they might be able to determine who Barry was speaking to and playing with in the wheelchair. They posed a sequence of this and that questions with fake names. "Barry, who's in the wheelchair? Is it Michael or Emily?" No response. "Is it James or Samuel?" No response. "Is it Stephanie or Teresa?" No response. They did this a few times before dropping in the real name casually. "Is it Kieran or Jen?" Right away he selected the correct hand. Everyone present was shocked. According to Chris, he was the only real link between Kieran and this house. Barry and Kieran didn't know each other, and he didn't believe anyone talked of the previous owner of the wheelchair, and he can't explain how Barry knew his name. This story doesn't end there, however. For reasons unknown to me, Chris took this wheelchair home for a while. maybe it was a keepsake. He took it home with him, and weird things began happening around his house. Chris and John, like I said, are brothers. They live in a big house and rent it out with their girlfriends, as well as 2 others. One day, everyone was out, except for John and Chris's girlfriend. Both of them claimed the door to Chris's bedroom slammed much too loudly and hard to be explained by wind, especially since no windows in his bedroom were open. This happened a few times while the wheelchair was there, which is more interesting when you know that Kieran would often get Chris's attention by slamming doors. John said other strange things had happened once the wheelchair arrived too, but I'm a bit confounded on details. I do know he claimed to have once heard someone calling his name, but no one was home but him. As I said, both Chris and John remain skeptics. They agree these events are all strange, but ultimately are not convinced. I too am what I call a hopeful skeptic. I would love for any of the paranormal subjects in the world to be verified, but I guess I need to see it myself to believe it. John summarized his feelings well by saying, "I'm not saying it was a ghost. I'm just saying weird things would happen while we had the wheelchair here, and they stopped when the wheelchair left." I asked about the current whereabouts of this wheelchair, but I forget what they said. Either they don't know, or it's somewhere else in the company, where Chris no longer visits. If I can get hold of it, I'd love to ask for more details. I'd like to know what you guys think about these stories. Specifically, I'm curious to know more about what John said are referred to as anchor points. The wheelchair was present when Kieran died. Apparently some believe that souls, which I do not believe in, can attach themselves to physical objects of importance from a person's life. This logic doesn't make sense to me. Even if I suspend my disbelief and believe in ghosts, what makes me believe these ghosts can attach themselves to objects? Is it the same logic that ghosts haunt certain areas, homes, vehicles, or rooms? I'm just dying to be convinced. And I always love hearing more stories and reading theories and learning about this topic. Finally, I'd like to mention that I spoke to John. He also has videos of the chair moving by itself on flat ground. It was deleted on his phone, but he hopes a co-worker still has it. He also clarified that he never really attributed these events to the chair until later when he heard staff speculate there was a cursed object, and he put it all together. Lastly, he added that another boy at the house was able to describe white dress, and he often played with the wheelchair too. The details get kind of confusing because the white dress stories and the wheelchair stories are separate, but he said it was all amplified once the chair arrived at the house. Finally, he told me of an incident where the wheelchair was rolling down hills and slamming the doors, and it was strange to him, because those were the things that Kieran loved to do the most while he was alive. A few years ago, I was reading a forum, and a woman said she had a haunted photograph. She said that the picture was taken of her, and there was a ghost girl beside her that wasn't there when the picture was taken. More importantly, she said that anyone that saw the photo had bad things happen to them. Naturally, I had to see it. She sent me a link. It was as she described. It didn't look scary to me at all, and nothing happened to me. Eventually, I forgot about it. Not long ago, I was looking for something in my messages and came across the link to the photo. I looked at it again and spent probably 2 minutes staring and trying to look at the ghost girl in detail. Then I closed the tab and forgot about it. Not 2 hours later, my stepmom calls me to tell me my dad had a pulmonary embolism. He lived. On his way home, my husband hit a deer and totaled his car, and that night my daughter got a horrible stomach bug that left us so dehydrated we had to go to the ER. I am never looking at that photo again. This happened when I was in my sophomore year in high school. I was at my friend Nick's house with a couple of other friends, and we were all staying the night. It was just the four of us high schoolers there that night. That same night, there was a severe weather warning due to a storm that had the potential to create tornadoes, which it did closer to the Connecticut River Valley and parts of Massachusetts. The wind, even without a tornado, was intense, and we were just glad that this house had a good-sized yard with no tall trees to fall. It was pouring rain. There was lightning and everything. We're all up on the second story of the top floor, and one of our friends was asleep and somehow managed to sleep through this. The rest of us were all awake, talking about how we weren't in danger of tornadoes, except one of us who was convinced we were all going to perish that night. Mid-conversation, there's a loud bang, and the entire house rattles. Okay, that's not supposed to happen. What could it be? We come up with some theories. Tree down, no trees. Earthquakes, no reports. Wind, well, there's no downed trees outside. And we're down to the bulkhead just slamming shut. Or something spooky. We grab a few knives and head downstairs. In the living room, we all notice for the first time how many porcelain dolls Nick's mother owns. We check every room to find nothing but those creepy dolls, but nothing that could cause a bang. There are 2 rooms left, the basement, and a closet that's barely enough to fit folded linens. We decide that if the bulkhead isn't locked, then we forgot to close it, and there'll be water in the basement, and the sound we heard was the wind knocking it shut. If the bulkhead is locked, we remembered to close it. The bulkhead was locked shut. The floor was bone dry, and the sound wasn't the bulkhead. There's 1 room left, the damn closet. What could be in a closet big enough for only Houdini himself to squeeze into? We open it up, and something falls, and we hear the sound of glass shattering. We look at the ground. It's one of the dolls. What was it doing in the closet? And why would it be propped up so easily to let it fall? We didn't care. We just went upstairs and did our best to fall asleep. It's something we all try not to think about, but everyone will once in a while be over there and hear a murmur or a grunt, and we'll never know where it's coming from. We also don't know whatever happened to the remains of that broken doll. Quite a few years back, I had met one of my now really good friends on the internet. I'm in Alabama, and she is from Washington State. During some of the first few months of our friendship, we started discussing paranormal things and whether we believed in them or not. We were young teens around 15 or so. Being that age, we hardly took anything seriously, so we brought up the topic of Robert the Doll, discussed his origins, and then started poking fun at him. We'd made remarks about it being comical, seeing him run around through the windows if you were a neighbor, how scared we'd be, even if he were locked in the attic, as I believe that's where they said he was put at one time. It's been a really long time since I'd actually researched him, but he was a fresh study on my mind at the time, and how his footsteps would have thrown us into sheer panic. However, as teens do, we kept laughing about him and making comments about how we'd stop him if he haunted us and such. All of a sudden, my phone started messing up. We were texting all of this back and forth and my screen started blanking out her texts. Right as I'm typing my text, I tell her I wasn't able to see her messages. A message from her actually comes through saying that her phone was messing up. I can't remember what her phone did, but I do know that we were very frightened and immediately apologized to Robert. It honestly seems crazy, him being in Florida and us being in two completely different states. But to this day, and according to her, every 6 months when I bring it up again, I really feel like Robert didn't take too kindly to our teenage stupidity and somehow interfered with our phones at the same time as a warning to stop. And we did. Till this day, when I tell people about my breathing dull, they don't believe me. They just say it was me, my vivid imagination. But my dull breathing was real, and the most vivid memory of my childhood, especially with unexplained experiences. The first time I saw the doll was at a flea market, with my mum and grandmother, and I fell in love with it. It was a big doll, only about 14 inches. After begging my mum to buy it and failing, my grandma bought it for me. Man, I loved that doll like it were a real baby. I bought it baby clothes, shoes, bottles, and the like. Took him everywhere. I named him Rocky, and people often thought I was holding my baby brother. Well, one day, I was outside playing with Rocky, and I was being a little too rough with him, throwing him up in the air and letting him fall repeatedly, scolding him when he wouldn't sit up on my bike. So I got him and threw him as high as I could and tried to catch him, but he slipped through my hands into the ground. I picked him up to dust him off, and that's when I heard him breathing. It was heavy and angry and fast, like someone would sound if they were really annoyed. I threw him on the ground and stared at him shaking, absolutely terrified. I leave him there and run inside. My mum asks me what's wrong, and when I tell her, she laughs it off, as if it were nothing. Says I'm being silly and to go and pick him up and bring him inside. I refused to touch him, and I screamed when she tried to force me. She gave up, picked him up, and looked at him and said, "See, he's just a doll, stuffing in plastic. He's not real. He can't breathe." That was the last day I ever played with dolls. I gave him to my brother for a home economics project he had, where you can carry around a bag of flour and pretend it's a baby, or something like that. Anyway, he used its head and attached it to the back of the flour to make it more babyish. He ended up getting extra credit for that. A few years later, the whole Chucky craze and killer doll movies were all the rage. All the while, I had a real demon doll of my own. When I was 16, I found a yellow sheer fabric, I think it was tapestry, with outline of white fishes on it in my parents' attic. It was summer. My room tends to get hot, so I ended up using it as a blanket of sorts. My parents have no recollection of it or why it was in our home. I remember one night as I was trying to look for it, and it seemed like it had vanished. I didn't really think much of it. I thought maybe my mum misplaced it when she washed it. I guess a few months passed and I remembered and wondered what had happened to it. My dad, turns out, burnt it. He said that one night he went to check on me and my sister, as we shared a room and slept in separate twin beds. He told me that when he looked at my bed, it seemed like no one was sleeping there. He got closer as he was worried, and I was there. He said the more he got closer, he noticed it looked like I was wrapped with pitch black darkness, which really freaked him out, because my bed was against two big windows and I purposely had really sheer curtains so that the moonlight and sun would brighten my room. But somehow, with the moonlight shining, I remained to look like darkness. My dad removed the blanket off me to make sure I wasn't passed out under it. He said he later looked at the blanket to see why the hell a sheer yellow blanket would do that. He said the white fishes didn't look like fishes at all. He described it as looking like the skeleton of fishes, with something inside the bellies trying to get out. That's when he decided to burn it. Honestly, I don't know what to think to this day. I never felt anything wrong with the blanket itself. I really think my dad was just being dad, as he's a man of faith, and around that time he was listening to a sermon of objects being able to retain spirits. Matthew 8:24-34 is what I remember him bringing up. I'm just wondering if anyone might have experienced anything like this. I'm not sure if the blanket was cursed, but whatever my dad thought, it was enough to burn the damn thing. Then again, my dad can be very extreme when it comes to things. I'd just like to know someone else's thoughts. I used to do contract security at the emergency room entrance of a downtown hospital, the graveyard shift. I would stand at a kiosk right inside the entrance and monitor access. Across from the kiosk were two sets of elevators. The first elevator on the right could only go up to the 3rd floor. The 2 floors above us were administrative floors, offices only, no patient areas. So on my shift, floors 2 and 3 were closed for the night. The elevator on the left I had to be especially trained to use. It serviced the same floors as the elevator, with the addition of a helipad on the roof. This is where life flight helicopters would land with life or death patients that had to be rushed to the emergency room. Security would be notified when a life flight was en route, and we'd take the elevator, use our access key, and go to the helipad. On the roof floor, we locked the elevator in the open position, so no one could summon it from another floor. The elevator would remain open and in position until the life flight crew had the patient inside and hit the floor 1 button. Security was not needed to assist the life flight crew. We would take the stairs down as soon as we had the elevator prepped on the helipad. It had been explained to me that the process was important and that people had died on the pad and even during the elevator ride down. I'm not a ghost person. I've never had haunting experiences, but that elevator behaved very oddly. Every night I worked, and the right side of the elevator that only serviced the 3 floors would rest on the 1st floor. Since it served floors that were not used during my shift, it just sat there on the main floor. I was required to check the 2nd and 3rd floors once a night. Whenever I went to the elevators, I never had to wait for the right elevator to get to my floor because it was already there. The left elevator that serviced the helipad and floors 2 and 3 had a mind of its own. All night it would go up and down from floor to floor with no one inside. You could watch the floor indicator for it. It bounced from floor to floor all night, and it would lower to the main floor, open with no one inside, close, and then go to floors 2, 3, or 5, the helipad. All this activity with no one inside it. The custodial crew was done on floors 2 and 3 by 10 p.m. Before my shift even started, there was no one around to use those elevators on my shift. On my nightly checks of the floors, I never saw anyone up there. The lights were even off. Not only that, but the left elevator would go all the way to the helipad by itself. You have to have an access key to even have that option. The other guards had no explanation. The hospital employees obviously didn't want to be seen as believing in a haunted elevator, and would change the subject or brush it off when I asked why the lift was so weird. But I would watch from the security kiosk all night as that thing would go from floor to floor all shift. It would open up on the 1st floor across from me, and it was always empty. The other elevator that only went to floors 2 or 3 never moved unless another security officer used it. This happened a few years ago. When I was 15, and had just started buying cassette tapes. Now, the reason why I did this isn't relevant to the story, so I'll make it quick. As many of you may know, concert tickets have gone up since not many people buy CDs, records, or cassettes anymore. Me, trying to be a world changer, I figured I could start a ripple effect and everyone else would magically start to buy them again. Yeah, right. Anyway, I'm a huge Metallica fan, and I had been looking for a Master of Puppets tape. I'd basically given up on trying to get my hands on a Kill 'Em All tape. I didn't trust eBay or most online retailers, but lucky for me there was a guy at my school who sold CDs called Dave. He was a little on the sketchy side, but at least I knew that if I got ripped off, I'd have an easier time getting my money back. I approached him one day and asked if he had a Master of Puppets tape. As soon as I asked him this, he went white as a sheet, looked extremely sick, and I said, "Dude, are you alright?" He didn't say anything, and just looked at me as if I had said a forbidden name. A few seconds go by, and he grabs the tape from his locker, practically throwing it at me, taking my $10 as he speed walks away. I stood there for a moment still in shock by how he reacted. I looked at the box. It looked like a normal Master of Puppets tape box. You know, with the graveyard cross headstones and the hands in the dark red sky. Then came the moment of truth. The actual tape, and if it was legit. I opened the box and inspected it. Yep, it was legit. Now my only concern was if the thing actually worked, because it wouldn't have surprised me if I went home and it wouldn't play. My concern was soon replaced with dread, and honestly, I didn't know why. Something about the tape began giving me bad vibes. My stomach felt sick just holding it. My instincts kept telling me to just throw it in the trash and get one somewhere else, but I didn't. Fast forward through school, I get home, pop the tape into my cassette and press play. Nothing. I take the tape out and put it back in. Still nothing. I take the damn tape out about 6 times, and nothing happened. At this point I was annoyed, because I thought this guy had ripped me off. That would explain the behavior when he gave it to me. I gave it one final attempt, and it didn't work, so I was going to confront him the next day. I put the tape in and pressed play once more, and there was nothing. Well, that guy better not have spent that $10, and as soon as I was reaching to turn it off, a blood-curdling scream came spilling out of the tape. Unless James Hetfield had taken hormone pills to sound like a woman, I didn't think the screaming was coming from him. I mean the sound. It sounded like she was being buried alive. Whatever the hell it was, I hoped it wasn't real. I repeatedly pressed pause, but it wouldn't stop. This went on for about 5 minutes, and in that time, a light bulb 5 feet away from me exploded. Other people may just shrug this off as a coincidence. I couldn't do that, no matter how hard I tried. After 5 minutes it stopped. However, the tape didn't. It went straight into the song Battery. Keep in mind that I've listened to the whole album numerous times, and while Battery is the first song played, there is absolutely no screaming whatsoever. I didn't know whether to be scared of the screaming, or the fact that it made the light bulb explode. I grew a pair and played it again. This time there was no screaming, and it played like a normal album. How is that possible, I thought? How can it have that horrific scream 1 minute and play as if nothing happened the next? Was there something wrong with the cassette player? I didn't know. But how could a cassette player cause something like that? Giving into my stupidity, I played the tape again. This time all the lights in my house went out. surrounding me in darkness, alone with this tape. By now I had lost myself. I knew that the tape was giving me bad vibes, and by the way Dave had acted, he had to have known something was up with it. I had enough. I took that thing out and completely smashed it. After smashing it, I made sure to put it at the very bottom of the trash barrel outside, because there was no way I was keeping this thing inside, even if it was in the trash can under the kitchen sink. I couldn't sleep that night. The nightmares I had about the screaming woman kept waking me up all night. Not only that, I felt like something was watching me throughout the night. My skin crawls just thinking about it. The next day when I went to look for Dave, he wasn't there. Going through the motions at school, I felt nothing but dread. Had something happened to him? Was it because of that tape? Or was he just skipping? There was no way to tell. I got home and I felt the urge to look into the trash barrel. I slowly opened the lid, praying to see its smashed remains at the bottom. Nothing. It was gone. My heart dropped. The feeling of dread was now getting overwhelming, and I felt an anxiety attack coming on. I tried to reassure myself that maybe I had just thought I put it in there. Maybe it was inside the trash can inside. But no. I specifically remember bringing it out there. All of a sudden, I heard screaming. The woman, and it sounded like it was coming from inside. I ran inside and my legs turned to jelly. The tape I had smashed was now playing in the cassette player, not to mention that it had somehow gotten inside. There was nothing I could do but sit there, waiting for this to end, hoping to God it was just a nightmare that I would wake from at any moment. I have no idea what the hell happened to that tape to make it so evil, but I don't want to find out. The sounds of the woman's screams still haunt me. It also doesn't help, the tape keeps coming back, no matter how many times I destroy it. However, I learned a lesson from this, and I hope you did too. Be careful who you buy from. I'm a 17-year-old female, and usually don't experience more than seeing a few shadows. A few sounds in the house here and there, the basic stuff. But I do have one story that I have never been able to explain, and to this day still have no explanation for. Children are way more susceptible to the paranormal than adults are. As a lot of you may know, as a child, I never really had any experiences, nor do I really remember my childhood much in the first place. This one memory stands out the most, yet I don't even remember exactly when it occurred. I don't remember what age I was at the time, but it was during the time I was living with my mum at my Mima's old house, so I must have been about 5 or 6. I think my dad was at work. He worked late nights and usually wasn't home until dawn. I was fast asleep on the couch one night. The small 2000s TV was on and was staticky and bright. It was the only light in the room. It was bright enough to light up the rooms connected to the living room, as we lived in a small house. I was asleep on the couch, and I sensed something was in front of me, which caused me to wake up. When I woke up, I saw one of my toys standing in front of me on the coffee table, just staring at me. It was one of those old Teletubby toys that had buttons on its chest that you could push, and it would sing or dance. When I opened my eyes, it opened its eyes. As soon as it opened its eyes, I ran to my mum's room and jumped on the bed. These toys can't walk, but the thing was chasing me. When I got onto the bed, it tried to follow but couldn't. Instead, it crawled under my bed. I just went back to sleep. The next morning, I got up to see if the toy was still under the bed. I couldn't see it, but one of my cats and some wooden boards were stacked underneath. I reached in to pet my cat and he was stiff. I looked at his face and had no idea what happened. My cat had his mouth and eyes wide open in a natural, relaxed position, sitting his head up as if he had no time to scream, and then he was just frozen in place. The toy was nowhere to be seen. I haven't seen that toy in years. It's a bit ironic, considering all the theories about the Teletubbies. A few years after the incident, I told my mum quite a few times, but each time she seemed to not remember. Until a few months ago. I mentioned it to her again, but this time got a completely different response. My mother has had the exact same thing happen to her as a child with a glowworm toy. She said that she had evidence, though. She wasn't the only one to see it. She had a sibling who was with her at the time that it happened to, and her brother had actually been bitten by the thing. It makes me wonder, what would have happened to me if I hadn't have had the instinct to run? I might have ended up like my cat. I still miss him. When I was about 5, I had a little doll that looked like a girl. I was made fun of for having this at the time, because I'm a guy. And if you pulled a string, she would sing a melody that sounded like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but the music box sounded broken. But I loved it. I took it to school, the courtroom, as we were adopting a little girl who is now my sister, and the store. No matter where I went, she went with me. But sometimes when you pull her string, she wouldn't stop playing. And it happened only at night, and it sounded more and more disoriented and demonic. But it didn't bug me. Someone stayed over and slept in my room, but they made me keep the doll in my room when I slept in my parents' room. It didn't bug me because I always had it on my dresser. But that night, we heard the person in my room screaming, and a door slam. Then the person slammed into my parents' room, trying to talk but couldn't get a word out. The only words I kept hearing was, "The door won't stop." And that's it. We took him down the stairs, sat him on the chair, and I was the last down because I grabbed the doll but hid it behind my back. When we calmed him down, he said, "I think that doll upstairs is possessed." It called my name and was staring at me with death in its eyes, and said that I was next when the music started playing and laughter came from it. He screamed at it to shut up, but it didn't, and so he fled. So this is a true story, and after we adopted my sister, my mum said she threw the doll away, because my parents started to hear her too. But now that I think of it, it was old, and did belong to a little girl that died in a car accident. I also want to let you know that we were doing some spring cleaning, and I found it in a box. I thought my mum had got rid of it, so I burned the box and its contents to ashes. My mum swore she got rid of it, so we'll have to wait and see what happens next. I was going to my sister's graduation in Binghamton University, and my family rented out a well-priced Airbnb for 2 nights. The only one that had 5 bedrooms, because extended Chinese family. It was a Victorian-era house, completely decked out with Victorian American aesthetics, trinkets, paintings of serious children, photos of even more serious children, ornate floral wallpaper and dolls. Many dolls. We were picking up bedrooms, and no one in my family wanted the room with the creepy dolls. I'm not superstitious, and I didn't see the room, and I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. So I was like, sure, I'll take the room with the dolls. You see where this is going. As midnight approached, I got tired, even after being energized by a tiny bite of baklava and an espresso. So I was the first to go to bed. I went into the room and saw the dolls. They were locked inside a glass case, all facing the bed. Don't be silly, I thought. You're a brave trans girl, and they're probably more afraid of you than you are of them. Because you're something they've likely never encountered before. Silly thoughts. I decided to take out my black ebony-handled Opinel pocket knife and slept with it at the nightstand, so I would have some protection. I watched YouTube for a while, turned off the lamp, and went under the covers. I felt the doll staring, but my rational side told me it was all in my head. By 3 a.m., I was half-conscious, slipping in and out of pure unconsciousness. While I was in a dreamlike state, I was aware of everything going on around me. The dolls staring. Were they next to me? I was afraid to open my eyes. I blinked. And I thought, it's okay, I have protection. I didn't dare look at the ebony-handled knife on the nightstand. I was afraid I'd see a doll next to me. Then I remembered statistically armed victims of assault tend to have their weapons taken away and used against them. And I thought, my gosh, I'm gonna get stabbed. Then I heard vividly a playful, childlike voice. It would be my heart's desire. I immediately became alert, like R2-D2 rebooting after being in low power mode. Adrenaline rushed through me. I heard a ringing in my ear as my awareness went from 0 to 60 in a split second. I stayed like that until the sun started to rise at around 5 a.m. That was when I fell asleep. When I woke up, I dreaded having to sleep there again for yet another night. The next night I thought, you know what? Violence begets violence. So I slept with my pocket knife in my bag instead. And I fell asleep and slept through the night. About 6 months ago, I received a haunted doll I bought off eBay. Now I have no idea whether this thing was actually possessed, but the previous owner claimed to have several bad experiences once she purchased it from a garage sale, claiming it smashed into her dinner room set when she was doing her hair in the bathroom. Walking out with a bat to investigate, only suspecting a break-in, only to find not a single sight of anybody or anything, and the diningware and table was untouched. The next experience she had was when she was getting ready for bed and heard a noise coming from behind the chair. The doll was sitting in, and say a dark figure with red eyes glaring at her with anger. Anyway, on to my ownership. When I received the thing, I was fully aware that a possessed object may not show signs of any activity from a few hours up to a few months of being relocated. I never experienced anything. I let it sit on a shelf and collect dust, only remembering it physically exiting my house every once in a great while. I would just randomly think about it, and even when I was doing something completely unrelated or busy at the house. A few days ago, I had lit a burn pile in my backyard to get rid of a bunch of branches and logs, when for some reason, I had the idea to grab the doll and burn it to be done with it. I went back to grab it, and as soon as I touched it, my heart began racing, increasing with every step I took towards my back door. I had finally made it outside to the fire, and tossed it back laying on the fire. Within seconds, it started smoking. As soon as it did, my heart stopped racing, and I got relaxed. 30 seconds later, its hair and clothes were in full flames, and I watched it as it began to look like something out of a horror movie. The eyes melted and sunk into its ceramic head, and it was converted into a charred, black soot, until nothing but the head, arms, and legs were left. I let the fire keep burning until all the wood had been burnt. My main question here is whether or not it was a good idea to burn a possessed object. If it is, I don't know what to think about it. Let me know what you guys think about my decision to set the thing alight. My daughter has several old porcelain dolls. When she was 9, she got a sudden interest in them. I had never bought them for her because they are often very delicate, and I didn't want her to break them. I took her to the Goodwill and she begged me for one. I let her buy it, since she takes very good care of her things, and I quickly noticed something was different in my house. I felt like I was being watched. Shortly after that, she asked for another doll at the Goodwill. Over the years, she has collected 3. I noticed she was very careful about which ones she picked. She treated the dolls like gold, and she keeps them sitting up in the corner of her bed. She tells me the dolls like me, since I'm so careful with them when I move them to make her bed. I see shadows around my house and hear soft voices. Nothing that makes me feel in danger, and I'm getting used to it. But it is, nonetheless, very freaky. My brother went fishing a while ago with some friends, on some native land that they really shouldn't have been on. While fishing, my brother finds a funny-shaped rock, and he brings it home. Like most people, rocks are rocks, and that's just about it. He brings it home and for some reason is fascinated with this rock. I look at it and think it's just a regular rock, but he decides to shine it and leave it on his bathroom window. Nothing happens. But after a few weeks, odd things begin to occur. The soap in his bathroom is always moved. You know, most people leave the soap in the little soap dish, as does he. And then, at random hours, he starts yelling out who's moved his soap, and it would be found in the oddest of places. I think the funniest was once in a sock in his drawer. He assumed that one of us was trying to pull a prank on him, but after interrogating the family, I think it was pretty clear that no one could be bothered enough to be hiding his soap. Then it escalated to his keys, his wallet, even his passport went missing for about a month. All in all, he decided that it must have been the rock. I'm unsure. Nothing ever happened to me. But he took the rock back to exactly where he found it on his next fishing trip, left it there, and according to him everything stopped after that. Make of it what you will, but my brother's a lot of things, but certainly not a liar. This happened about 12 years ago, when I was about 11. It was the day after Christmas, and my mum and stepdad and I were sitting in the living room watching TV. It was past 9 p.m, and my little brother had already gone to bed. Now my brother and I had gotten remote control cars for Christmas, the kind that had rechargeable batteries in both car and remote. As we were watching TV, my car, that had been in the middle of the living room floor, starts making a noise like it's turned on. At this point, all 3 of us look at it and witness it drive around in circles twice to make a perfect 3-point turn, then park up against the wall. We all kind of just look at each other, and my mum goes to check on my brother, as he was supposed to be in bed. She comes back looking a bit concerned, saying my brother is flat out, and when he sleeps, he really sleeps. There's no faking the bear snores he gives off. So she then asks me and my stepdad whether we were playing a prank. We both deny it. My stepdad even pointing out that the controllers to both cars had been on the side table where my brothers and I left them after playing with them earlier in the evening. My mum proceeds to check both controllers and the cars for batteries. All the batteries were in the charging docks, plugged into the wall, and we had run the batteries out while playing with them earlier. My mum, brother and I had some strange experiences in this house, but this was by far the strangest I have ever experienced personally. I can't think of a logical explanation for this. I've always thought, perhaps, it was a ghost. Since he started walking, I've shared a room with my younger brother. For maybe 7 or 8 years, we've slept in a bunk bed. Me on the top and him on the bottom. It's positioned so that one side is against the wall, which I've always slept against. It is extremely difficult to even touch me from there without climbing into the bed, which shakes a lot. Ever since I was young, I've had a fear of the dark, so to this day I sleep with a blanket over my head. A few years ago I was trying to get to sleep when I felt someone punch me in the throat, except there was no pain. It just felt like a powerful force hit me. The bed didn't shake, so no one had climbed the ladder, and I know that you can't punch with that force over the side of the bed. I lifted the sheet from over my head, and there was nothing there. I collect Lego sets, and one of my biggest is a large circular spacecraft that has a large ring on the outside connected to a cockpit in the middle. The cockpit has a handle attached to it that lets you spin it. Whenever it spins over a certain point, it makes a noise. The ship had fallen off the shelf, and the ring had broken apart. So I put all the pieces into a box to keep them together. One night, my brother was at a sleepover, so it was just me in the room, when all of a sudden the spaceship makes a noise. I assumed it was the handle falling over the point where it makes the noise, when the noise repeated, which would require the handle to rotate upwards from where I assume it was. This happened a total of 4 or 5 times before it stops. Needless to say, I rebuilt that ship the next day. A number of years ago, me and my boyfriend went on holiday to Mexico. We were looking around the pyramids on one of our tours, and as we're getting back to our hotel, my boyfriend sneaks me off to the side, away from the tour guide, and shows me something he has in his pocket. By his face, he had been itching to tell me for a while. I thought he'd been acting funny, and that's when he pulls out a small rock. I look at it without much interest and go back to hearing the tour guide when he pulls me over again and says, "Listen, I got this from the ruins." I give him a puzzled look. "Why would you do that?" I say. "I thought it was really cool to have a piece of history with us forever. We can put it in our house." I give him a faint smile. I wasn't really sure why he decided to take a random rock home, but I didn't think it was such a terrible thing. Anyway, that night, I had the worst dreams ever. I dreamt that I was seeing my closest friend Abby with only one arm. She was trying to tell me something, but it was like she was underwater, frantically waving her arm and stump, and I woke up in a cold sweat and it really freaked me out. I called her up back home, but she was still asleep. Figures. I tried going back to sleep, but there was a deep-rooted sense of fear in my gut, and something was preventing me from sleeping with ease. I tossed and turned, and then my boyfriend poked me in the side. I instantly turned and asked him what was wrong. He said he had a horrible dream that my friend Abby only had one arm. This freaked me out a little. I hadn't said anything out loud. Even when I tried attempting the call, I didn't leave a voicemail or a message of any kind. There was no way he could have known or heard me. I brushed this off as a simple coincidence, but for the next 3 nights I didn't sleep well, and a general feeling of unease overcame me. We had a few days left of the holiday still, and one afternoon, as I was sitting up in my room waiting for room service as I wasn't feeling all that well, did I see a shadow, about half the size of a normal person, dart from our bed to the bathroom. I was reading a book at the time, and I just about crapped myself. I don't move, feeling completely vulnerable. I just stare at the corner where it went towards the bathroom and listen and wait. Minutes pass, and with trepidation, I scoop myself off the bed and look past the corner. There's nothing there, no one to be alarmed about, and I start to get scared. That's when I see the rock my boyfriend took from the ruins. It's just on the glass table in front of the TV. And I wonder, all of this started when he brought the rock. Could it be? I go downstairs to rejoin my boyfriend a little while later and start speaking to him about the rock and asked him what made him want to bring it. He confessed he just thought it was cool and would be something fun to show the lads. I gave him a snort and went to speak with the bartender and get another drink. We started a conversation and I steered it towards culture and history, and then finally towards the ruins. I wanted to be subtle, and I said that I heard of the people that took objects from ruins like rocks and stuff. His demeanor changed from the happy, pleasant tone we were conversing in prior, and he looked at me and said, "Did you take something from the ruins?" "No," I said, lying through my teeth. "Good. They say that those who take from the sacred sites are haunted by aluches." I asked him what this funny word meant, and he said that in Mexican culture, they are these tiny dwarf-like spirit things that can drag your soul to the ground and kill you if you're not careful, that they are not to be trifled with. I understood them to be somewhere between a ghost and a bogeyman, but I took his warning very heavily, as I had seen something half the size of a man earlier that day. I told my boyfriend later in the evening that I was having misgivings about him having taken the rock, and convinced him that the best thing to do would be to return it. So he begrudgingly agreed, and we took the same tour again, albeit with a different tour company to not be suspicious, and he returned the rock exactly where he found it. I'm happy to say the rest of our vacation was spirit-free, and the feeling of unease lifted. Whether the feeling was in my mind or not is another matter, but I know that I saw that shadow dart from our bed to the bathroom, and it's something I'll never forget. Don't go pilfering sacred sites, people. You never know if you might bring more home with you than you expected. The paranormal has followed me for my entire life. These events I'm about to share span from when my mum was pregnant with me until I was about 8 years old. My parents built a house in Sashi, Texas, when they were first married and had an English bulldog called Muggins. 2 years after my parents were married, my mum became pregnant with me. The activity began with their dog, Muggins. Mum was about 7 months pregnant with me, and wanted to sit in a chair in the living room to watch TV. Muggins was in the chair, and Mum told him to get down, and he would. So she went to push him off the chair, and he growled and snapped at her, and his eyes flashed green. Not wanting to get attacked by her dog while pregnant with me, she let him have the chair, and she sat on the couch. Fast forward another month, and my dad was trying to get Muggins to go outside. He refused, turned on my dad, eyes flashing green again, and attacked him, but luckily he wasn't hurt. Mum and Dad couldn't believe how Muggins had changed. He was such a sweet dog before moving into that house. Mum and Dad decided to give him away to an elderly man they knew. They asked the man months later, after I was born, how Muggins was acting. He informed them that he was doing great, an amazing companion, but the activity didn't stop there. My mum and dad were in bed, and my mum woke up my dad rocking back and forth in bed shouting, "No, stop, get off me." My mum, thinking he was having a nightmare, started shaking his shoulder. "Rick, wake up, you're having a nightmare." That didn't work, so she slapped him across the face, and before she knew it, something scratched her eye. It couldn't have been my dad. His arms were pinned to his chest, and he has very short fingernails. My mum's eye doctor confirmed she had a perfect cut right across her eyeball. Unfortunately, it didn't do any permanent damage. The next event happened one day when my mum was home with me. She went into the kitchen, pulled a glass from the dishwasher, filled it with ice, then some cola, and before she could lift the glass to take a sip from it, the entire rim of it broke off in a perfect circle. "Stupid me," she said to herself. The glass must have still been too warm when she lifted it, she thought, and then put ice in it. She threw the glass out for another, and did the same process, and the glass did the same thing. Mum at this point knew it wasn't a coincidence, and she yelled out for whatever it was doing that to stop it. And, as they say, third time's the charm, and she finally got to enjoy an ice-cold soda. This last experience was mine. I was about a year old, sitting in the living room floor, when one night, in front of the TV, with my mum sitting on the couch behind me, and my dad already being in bed, the living room was dark. The only light was coming from the TV. In the corner of the left of the TV, I saw a tall shadow figure of a man. I couldn't see any facial features, but I could tell he was wearing an old-fashioned suit from like the 50s. He must have noticed me when I saw him. He simply took his hat off, tipped it at me, and I saw he was bald. I pointed at him and said, "Mummy, man." When my mum and I talk about it to this day, she says that she never saw anything, and that she is shocked I could remember, considering that I was barely one. But she knows I'm not making it up, since she remembers that night very well. My parents sold that house not long after. My mum swears it was a demonic presence. Maybe. But who knows? I used to own many dolls and stuffed animals, as most 7-year-olds would. I believed in magic and had a huge fantasy. I even believed my dolls could move and do stuff when I wasn't watching, like in Toy Story. I always wanted to see my dolls move, but unfortunately never saw it. One day, my mother gave me a bowl of mashed potatoes and a glass of water. I went upstairs to my room and decided to have a nice meal with my dolls. I got some plastic bowls and spoons and put mashed potatoes in their bowls. I was hoping they would actually eat it. I had this one old-fashioned doll my grandma gave me, called Mary. I put the spoonful of mashed potatoes in her mouth and waited for her to eat it. Of course, nothing happened. After a few minutes, I wanted to go to the toilet, and before I left, I looked at my dolls and said, "When I get back, I want all the bowls to be empty," in a strict tone. So I did my thing, went back upstairs since we only had one toilet, which was downstairs, and when I got back to the seat, the bowls were unfortunately still full, which meant the dolls hadn't eaten a thing. But when I looked at Mary's bowl, it was empty. I was kind of shocked. I looked at Mary and her mouth was dirty, as if she had been eating it in a messy way. I rushed downstairs to my sister and mother and asked them if they had fed the doll, because the bowl was empty. They both said no and swore on their lives. "Maybe your mashed potatoes fed it to the doll," one of them said. But since I believed in magic, I was just happy about it. This wasn't the last time I saw Mary acting unusual. One time I put her on my bed before I went on vacation to Morocco, and after 6 weeks, when I arrived back to the Netherlands, I saw that Mary wasn't sitting on my bed anymore. Instead, she was sitting on my trash can and her body faced the wall, but her head was turned 90 degrees so that her head was facing me. My mother said, "You must have put her there before we left and you just forgot." That was weird. It wasn't the last time she did anything unusual. In 6th grade, I went camping with my class and took Mary with me. We made a huge fire where we were eating marshmallows. I took my doll out the bag and threw her in the fire. Everyone was confused, so I explained the paranormal experiences I had with Mary. And even though people didn't believe me and thought I was crazy, I was glad to be rid of her, and I'm glad I haven't seen her since that day. My dad passed away when I was 11. Every summer we went to a little town which had a porcelain doll museum. I loved going there, hanging out with my dad, and had several dolls myself, but the one I loved the most was one that resembled an Indian girl with 2 braids. I kept it on a shelf that was facing my bed, pushed it to the corner, and I had it for 3 to 4 years. I didn't even touch it, I only admired it. Well, as I mentioned, my father died in December. Fast forward half a year later, it's June, summer holidays, and I'm laying on my bed with my laptop, chatting with my friends at midnight. Both my door and window were open, but it was quiet outside with no wind, and the doll suddenly fell to the floor. I was startled by the noise but confused since it didn't shatter. The shelf was 1.7 meters high, so I turned off the light, covered myself in a blanket, and went to sleep, hoping I could. The next morning the doll was still on the ground face down. I started to think how it could fall. It was protected from wind, although there was none, and a 40-centimeter empty space in front of it. I got up shaking and slowly approached it. I sat on the floor and picked it up. It was intact, except for one thing. The left braid was cut in half, not torn, cut. I quickly put it away and never touched it again, nor even took a look at it. I still don't really know what happened. I tried to think it was my dad comforting me, but as I grew older that didn't seem logical. Why would my dad, who loved me the most, try to hurt my favorite doll? When I was 19 or so, I had moved into my first apartment alone. I got all my furniture from the thrift store next door. They were pretty good finds too. My favorite was a pair of red armchairs that I'd often fall asleep in while reading. One night I woke up, and there was a little girl sitting in the chair across from me. The lights were still on as I had fallen asleep reading, and I could move around, so I knew it wasn't sleep paralysis. She started playing peekaboo, and so I played back. When I removed my hands after the 3rd time, she was gone. I did have sleep paralysis at least 3 times a week in that apartment, but it was nothing like that night playing peekaboo. When I was very young, my grandmother had a painting that hung in the living room of her old house. The painting was of 2 women at a piano, one playing while the other listened, and pointed at the music, as if in the act of teaching the song. I would often sleep over at her house as a child. I have countless distinct memories of seeing the figures of the painting move at night, not in an intelligent way, but in a sort of acting out the scene sort of way, almost like how a GIF on the internet is nowadays, constantly looped actions. The woman playing the piano would begin to actually strike the keys and tap her foot to the rhythm, while the other woman would nod her head in approval or disapproval as she judged the performance. There was no sound. I was so young, and saw the painting do this so often that I thought nothing of it, and accepted the idea that some paintings out there can move on their own. Decades later, I remembered the painting, and noticed I hadn't seen it in a long time. I asked my now very old grandmother about it. She told me that she had wrapped it in cloth and locked it in her closet. I jokingly told her that as a child I thought I saw the painting move at night. She went dead serious on me and said, "Me too, dear. Why do you think I don't put it up anymore? Thanks for telling me you saw it. I thought I was crazy all these years. About 6 years ago, I lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My grandmother lived a few miles away from us in the middle of the woods. I used to love her house, but looking back, that house was pure horror. They had 100 acres of woods and not a house in sight. There was an old abandoned barn they used for storage for tools, but the rest of the property was unused. I was a kid, first, second grade, and every time I visited I would sleep in a spare bedroom, aka the kids' room. The kids' room had a glass case mounted on the wall with at least 50 dolls all aligned looking straight forward. My great-grandmother collected vintage dolls from every state, and I was always petrified of that room, but didn't have much of a choice. One night, me and my sister are sleeping in the room, sharing the same bed when I wake up. The room is completely black, except for the dim hallway light. I remember seeing one of the doors of the case open, and one of the dolls started moving. Another time I was in the kids' room alone. I couldn't sleep because of what I saw last time, and that's when I noticed one of the dolls was out of place. Its head was facing the door, and this was odd because they were all mounted to the case and couldn't move. The doll's head began to slowly turn and look at me. I was off center to the left, so there's no way it wasn't paranormal. I sat there sweating bullets under my blanket, too afraid to yell for my grandma, and I eventually passed out, and when I woke up, the dolls were facing forward again. They have moved out the house since, and I think the dolls are in storage, but they still own part of their land and use it for camping. I don't know what's been happening, but everything has been weird in our home lately. My cousin said it was probably a ghost joking, but it got me thinking. Everything in our refrigerator has been expiring and is full of mold. Nothing was supposed to expire until the end of next year, and yes, our refrigerator temperature is fine. It's 36 Fahrenheit. The dishwasher was full of maggots as well, which almost caused me to vomit. I've been hearing soft footsteps lately in the living room when I'm home alone. The walls are soundproof as well, so it can't be my neighbors. And I have 2 cats, but they're always in my bedroom. Even my cats, for God's sakes, have been hissing and running away from the pantry when I open it. I removed all the bags and food, which caused them to get even more scared. This all started about 2 weeks ago when my mother brought antique dolls at the thrift store, which, yes, I know is a stretch to even think they're haunted, and it might be a coincidence, but I'm not taking any chances. This might all have been something to do with those dolls. I don't really understand why this is happening now. I'm very uncomfortable in my own home. We can't move out. We can't afford anything like that at the moment. I just want to know what is going on.